everybody, to our 2nd of December meeting. So this is traditionally our presentations meeting. So we've got some wonderful guests that we are receiving today. Although there is a wee change in the fact that the deputation at 11 AM with Mr. John Priest, he's no longer unable to be with us today, so we will reschedule that probably in the new year sometime to suit Mr. Priest. So we might have a little bit of adjustment of time there. We'll just see how we go, councillors. Yeah, we have got a item on our agenda to kick us off, which is our adoption of our annual report, and we'll just talk to that in a wee moment. But I will just go through the normal procedures. So health and safety matters, should we need to exit the building, either the door to my left or the door that you entered, and our assembly point is over by the safety line on the grass. We have received 3 apologies from councillors this morning. So I've received apologies from Councillor Tom Davies, Councillor Dave Hislop and Councillor Vince Davies. So could someone please move and second? Thank you, Fiona. Someone second. Thank you, Steve. That we accept those apologies. All in agreement with that, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. I am going to read the affirmation today because the adoption of an annual report is a really important part of the calendar of any council. And it is a decision item, our only decision item for today. So our affirmation does read for Hiranui District Council that we pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skills, wisdom and judgment throughout the discussions and deliberations ahead of us today in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of Hiranui District at large. We commit individually and as council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the values that we believe distinguish and enrich our district. Thank you. Councillors, in regard to the agenda today, is there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? No, thank you. And we have a recording device as usual, Graham, and the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Yes, correct? Yeah, thank you. And just to make certain that you have all received separately circulated the annual report that Jason sent out on Friday the 28th, and we will be referring to that, and there are some additional items in paper copy at your desks as well. So has everybody received those? Yeah, thank you. That's great. So I warmly welcome Jason to the table, but also Chantal. Chantal Bielitsky is our auditor for our council. Chantal's just returned back to us, so we're delighted to have Chantal as our auditor for our council, and she has a separate responsibility that supports the audit process. And I just want to acknowledge probably, and you know, this has been a lengthy process for Jason and the team. And we had a discussion in the previous triennium for new councillors that we take a bit more time to achieve a result that actually is outside the normal statutory time frame, but we, you know, there are reasons, some beyond our control, that we could manage. So hence the reason for the annual report coming to our council today. Generally, we would have that at the last council meeting before the end of October, because it's a deadline that we would meet. So for various reasons, and Jason might describe those for new councillors as well. But perhaps, Chantal, you've met some of us around the Audit and Risk Committee table, but perhaps it might be quite nice for you to understand who the councillors are sitting around the table, and then I'll just call on Jason to go to his report. So maybe if I start with you, Pauline.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Chantal. I think we have met before, but not via Audit and Risk. Pauline White, Southwood Councillor, third term.
Hi, Chris McCarthy, West Ward, Western. Steve Hutt, South Ward first term.
Scarlett, West Ward, first term.
Brett Jones, South Ward, first term.
Robbie Road, South Ward, West.
That's great, and we've got 3 councillors able to be with us today. So yeah, that's just where it sits, where life sits at this time of the year as well. So, but it's lovely to have you with us, Chantal. So, hey, Jason, can I please just hand over to you and take us through the annual report, perhaps the process that we've gone through, and then we'll see there may be some questions, and then we'll go from there. And we have got a presentation due at 10 AM. So that does give us a wee bit of time to walk through the report. Thank you.
Thanks, so yeah, there's a covering report in the agenda. It was done prior to finalising the version of the annual report that was sent through on Friday, but and there has been some updates to the over the weekend, and I've attached some exception reports with the changes that were made in purple, and also there's a summary annual report also, which has got a number of changes again in purple. But I'll just quickly go through my covering report. Just a background, the statutory requirement is that we do sign off an annual report by the 31st of October each year. But it was identified early in October that the ability to meet that statutory deadline was going to be challenging. And the reasons have been that I've had my finance staff involved with the implementation of our new ERP system, and there's been a truckload of work relating to the development of the water services delivery plan that's taken a lot of time away from me, and there was also timing relating to the critical valuation work to the roading network. But so very early on, in conjunction with the Mayor, the CEO, the Chair of and the independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee, we met with the auditors and deferred by 5 weeks, knowing that we would breach a statutory deadline, but to make sure that we covered all the bases appropriately, we just needed that time. And as it's turned out, we've had sort of a few comings and goings with our roading valuation, which I'll talk about soon, that has just needed some time to work its way through. So the key points to note, so there's on page 78 or 79 of the version that you've received is our statement of comprehensive revenue and expense. In old parlance, that's our profit and loss statement. The upshot is that we recorded an operating deficit of 7.39 million. And the key components of that are summarised. Their revenue, total revenue was 65 million, which is about 3 million lower than what we had budgeted for, but our key reasons being the subsidy and grants, particularly the fact that there is no funding for low-cost, low-risk roading projects, but that was offset by receiving money from for the Soldiers Block upgrade, and also another variance to the budget was that we had budgeted 1.6 million to be received from the Provincial Growth Fund towards the fly ride project in Hamner Springs. We only met the conditions to receive 700,000 of that, so there's about 900,000 in the other key variance there is that development in the district during the year was significantly lower than the previous year. We received only 685,000 of development contributions rather than the 1.37 million that we had budgeted for. And we also had budgeted to receive about $2.8 million worth of vested assets, and we had no vested assets passed over from developers during the financial year. And we've talked earlier that our the revenue we've received from the thermal pools is about $1 million lower than our relatively optimistic budgets, but that was highlighted quite early on in the the development of so the $1 million, but the profit from the pools, excluding the grant from the Provincial Growth Fund, was about $500,000. It was about $400,000 lower than what we had budgeted. And total expenditure is it was 72 million, and that was about 1.7 greater than the budget. And it's been particularly in insurance. We had a bit of a price hike in the provision of professional indemnity cover. Electricity costs relating to our water supplies were up on budget, and there was a couple of items that we had initially treated as capital expenditure, but then expense. And one of those was the renourishing of the button at Amberley Beach. We had budgeted a capital project of about 750,000, but the total cost of that has been expensed. Their finance expenses were just a shade under $1 million higher than what we had budgeted for, but that is entirely due to the reduction in the value of our interest rate swaps. So it wasn't our actual interest cost was pretty much on what at the level that we had budgeted. The key change that was made to the report after I had provided this covering report was that we had revalued our roading network at the end of June, and it has resulted in an $89.5 million increase to our roading network. Now, there is another component to that when the auditors were reviewing the roading valuation, they identified a component of our roading assets called road formation. The unit cost rates that was assigned to that was significantly lower than the sector standard. Now, road formation is stuff right underneath the road and builds up, and it's a component that we don't replace at all. We don't actually depreciate it, and as a result, we don't have any sort of reliable contract rates to be able to determine what a standard unit cost rate will be. But in comparison, through Becca, they did a comparison for 6 similar sized councils in the South Island, and we had moved a unit cost rate from $8.50 up to $25.50. And that had the effect of increasing the value of our roading network by another 140 million. Sounds big numbers, but they are purely paper numbers because we don't use that component's not depreciated, so we don't it doesn't have too many effects other than the value of the assets. But it does push the total assets for council now to just over $1 billion, which is, I don't know whether that's a tick or not. It is just a number, but we're a $1 billion organisation for the time being. And that $1 billion is about 104 million higher than what we had this time last year, and that's due to that increase in the rating values. The debt level, we had budgeted the debt level at the end of June to be 86.5 million. It ended up being 87.1 million, and we had a couple of key capital purchases towards the end of the financial year that just tipped it over the level. The purchase of the land in Ashworth Road was key factor in that. Now, the annual report itself has been reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee a couple of times. We had our first review on the start of September, where the valuation issues that were known at that point were put in front of the committee, and then there was another full draft annual report presented to the Audit and Risk Committee 3 weeks ago. And yeah, that meeting was attended by Chantal, and at that stage we were still progressing the final audit, so there was still work to be done and still changes made to the report. So I did circulate the full annual report on Friday. The key changes that have been made are largely cosmetic changes. You can see the page that's just headed up, condition of footpaths. Within the annual report, we do have a whole range of performance measures that we report, and there was just some additional disclosure information we were required to provide. And so in respect to roading, we just needed to define what a response was because we've got three items there that we are measured based on response times, and that's provided a bit more detail on page 47. And then just to determine that final measure for roading was around how we calculate the closed service records. Just a bit more disclosure in there. The other changes, it's just very much a note change. Page 79, the balance sheet there, it was just an asterisk beside the opening balances of our infrastructural assets, and that goes to refer to note 31 of our annual report, which relates to an adjustment to the opening balances, and I'll explain that. And similarly, on page 80, the statement of equity, you can see that we've got an adjustment to the opening balance of revaluation reserves of 135 million, and again, that just refers to that note. And then similarly on page 107, the property, plant and equipment schedule, just again, an asterisk beside the opening balance of the roading assets there refers to the note. And then similarly, pages 116 and 117 is our equity note, and again, just making sure that people see that there's been an adjustment to the opening balance, that they need to refer to what is on page 131, the adjustments to the opening balances. And so we've got so that adjustment to the value of the road formation does relate to previous financial years. So we've needed to go back and theoretically reset what the value of the road formation was with our last valuation in 2022, and at that point compared to now, there was a difference of 135 million. So the value of the asset as at June 2022 should have been 135 million higher than what we ended up reporting. So there is a process where we've identified that is a prior period adjustment that doesn't relate to the current financial year. So we've provided a lot more disclosure about that. The prior period adjustment itself does need to be heavily reviewed by the auditors and signed off by the technical team in Wellington, and so that was done over the weekend. So that's the annual report, and coupled with that is the summary, and I provided a copy of the summary, and again the changes made to the summary to date. Again, the requirement was just to be a bit more explicit about the adjustments to the opening balances. So again, on page 10 and 11, highlighted in purple is the exact note from the full annual report. And again, just highlighting on page 25 and 26, where we just needed to make a reference back to that adjustments to the opening balance. But certainly happy to answer any specific questions about the annual report, and then I'll hand over to Chantal to talk about the audit process.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. Just a comment to start off with, you know, on page 47 and the performance measures, I really just want to acknowledge the note in regard to the CSRs and the process that once the CSR is received, what will happen, and report back to the customer, and you know who it's going to fix it. I think that's probably something that from last triennium, you know, was a I guess that closing that loop and understanding that. So I think that's good that that note will be in that performance measure to understand how that might happen. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that. I guess.
And that was certainly a requirement that the auditors came through with, which makes sense because we could just acknowledge the receipt of the CSR and that's a response, and we can have 100% all the way through, or we can, but yeah, a response is much more than just saying thanks for your CSR and move on with life.
Yeah, no, so I think that's a really good step forward because there's a bit of history on that as well. So thanks, Jason. But is there any other questions that councillors may have in regard to the table, you know, the delay and the process? So, you know, just to know that this is, you know, within our scope, and we've been, you know, working closely with the audit team. So, Chris, you have a question in regard to the annual report?
I do, thank you. Just querying on the cost increases on the roading. It's quite significant, 8%. When you do the valuation on our roading asset, which was quite vast, excuse my ignorance, just a little bit of the methodology implied on that, just so that I understand it.
Certainly. So each component of the road is, you know, we've got the physical assets sitting in what used to be called RAM, say AWM now, and each of those components are given a unit cost rate based on our contract rates generally, and because most of our contract sits with Cord, it's actually scheduled in the contract, so we're able to rely on those being the proxy for the replacement cost of that asset. Now, and it's the same with any of our assets that we do get revalued. They're broken down into components. We determine unit cost rates, and then that just applied to the full value. We get to what a theoretical replacement cost is, and then we take into account the age of the asset and depreciate it, or what is called depreciated, optimized depreciated replacement cost, because the optimized is some of the materials that we may have used 50 years ago are no longer appropriate, so we would value that component based on the best fit moving forward. And then that gives us what's called the optimized depreciated replacement cost, and that's deemed to be the fair value of the assets at that point.
Sorry, interrupting. So essentially, what I'm understanding is all the subsoils, all the sub-compressions, the AP40s, the 60s, all that are costed out in today's costs. That's right. Thank you.
And that is we do have a process of revaluing a class of our assets every year. So this year was roading, next year it's land and buildings, but we're going to do 3 waters as well, because that's going to be the transition date to the WISCO. But certainly for the 3 waters, it's important to have it as up to date as possible, because that dictates what our depreciation should be moving forward, and that depreciation is the component that we should be funding at 100%. But we obviously haven't been funding at 100%. As a result, we've got an operating deficit each year, and we'll continue to have an operating deficit until we are funding 100% depreciation, but there's always exceptions to that.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any other questions, Robbie?
Oh, just a quick question, James. You mentioned a couple of things that we're valuing. I know some of them we can't insure, land works, and when we rebuild something like that, does insurance company get involved, or they just take our figure, whack the premium up, we have to.
Well, for buildings, when we do a valuation for financial reporting purposes, but at the same time we do a full insurance revaluation at that point, and that's what we rely on for our three waters. Those valuations are important to the valuers. We've got two sets of insurers relating to water. These are underground assets, which is insured by the local authority protection program. And then we've got the above ground assets, which is covered as part of their material damage policy. And it is important to always have as up to date valuations as possible, because things happen, and you need to have that cover in case those things happen.
Oh, thank you, Robbie. So is there no further questions? Or if there's no further questions, sorry, Hamish.
I've just got a small one. So the 135 mil doesn't appear in the gains part of the equation because of the prior year adjustment. So we only show the 90 million in the gains. Yeah, okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And so
recognising that 135 was previous years increases that should have been booked.
So that 135 has happened because we've just applied a increase over time, but the actual cost has escalated far beyond what the cost increases that we applied.
That's correct, and that's just direct comparison with other like councils in the South Island. In the past, we have just, because we don't have viable contract rates to be able to say that's the cost of the unit cost rate for formation. It has just been indexed with a price adjustment made to it for a number of valuations in the past. So it's sort of writing what was should be potentially done in 2022.
So that might be a pointer to our future if there was a band applied of 2 to 4%, and costs were escalating beyond that 2 to 4%, you'd be going backwards.
Yes.
Thank you, Hamish. So do you want to hand over to Chantal?
Yeah, I'll handle that.
Yeah, thank you, Chantal.
No worries. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I've got a little edge problem. Let me put my glasses on so I can see what I'm reading. So the intention is that we are issuing you an unmodified report. And we are satisfied that the financial statements and annual report fairly present Ruanui District Council's and Group's activity for the year and its financial position at their end. We have discussed any misstatements that we found with management, other than those that were clearly trivial, and the financial statements and disclosure deficiencies. And we have identified disclosure deficiencies in the statements and the financial statements, and they have been corrected. And where they haven't been able to be corrected, we've included them on your letter of representation. And there's 3 items that are included on the letter of representation. All 3 of them actually have rolled forward from the prior year. One was an overstatement of the Three Waters infrastructure assets from the prior year, where the adopted unit cost rates for various reticulations assets could not be appropriately supported by the council's cost information or comparable sector information obtained. And that we believe is an estimated misstatement of about 7.5 million. The entry to correct an understatement of carrying value of Three Waters infrastructure from the prior year, where 2 sewer ponds were not included in the revaluation of 1.3. And we've identified unreconciled difference between the fixed asset register and the general ledger from prior year. And this also impacts property, plant and equipment and equity of 470,000. We are satisfied that these misstatements are individually and collectively immaterial. We want to thank council and management for the engagement we've had on these items. Some of them have been challenging to work through, but we've worked well together to make sure that we got the result in terms of presenting to you today. Our focus areas from the audit plan related to the reevaluation of property, plant and equipment, which we've spoken about quite extensively. We reviewed the revaluation process, including source data collection, methodology of the valuation reports and reasonableness of assumptions, and concluded that the valuations were appropriate for inclusion in the financial statements, noting the adjustment that happened in the prior period. We also worked through the fixed asset reconciliation. As I said, this was identified through last year's audit. What we did is we noted that that unreconciled difference still exists, and we've accepted that on the basis of materiality, but we do believe that still needs to be worked through and corrected. We also looked at the risk of management override and internal controls, which is your journal process or any bias that is attached to your assumptions or estimations. We completed test of a judgmental sample of journals and looked at the accounting estimates to address this risk, and we did not identify any matters that we need to bring to your attention. The good news story, so it's always good to have the auditors telling you a good news story. The council is required to report against performance measures set out in the non-financial performance measures rules of 2024. One of the items that we had in the previous year around smooth travel exposure was qualified. Council went through a process this year where they got an expert in to assist them with the development of estimates around traffic counts, which is used as part of the calculation that we work through. The work that we did on 2025 was able to show us that the result reported in 2024 was consistent with expectations. And we also looked at all the other information that was included in the annual report, including maintenance spend, and all of the outcomes were consistent in terms of our expectations, where we could say that the 2025 reflected a consistent performance measure in terms of 2024. So the qualification of last year, which you would normally have as comparative in the current year, is not there. So your audit report this year is unqualified for both 2025 and 2024. The other matters that we worked through this year were the local water jump well program, which we would have looked at as a subsequent event, the approval of the secretary of the water plan for Haringiri is appropriately included in the annual report, and all the decisions are documented. And although there is some uncertainty around what the future holds and what that will look like in terms of the relationship, we believe that it is not so extreme that we should have to emphasize it, so there's no emphasis within your audit report. Jason has spoken about the prior period adjustment that went through. What we noted is council engaged an external valuer to value its roading assets. We reviewed and identified that the formation rates used by the valuer were significantly lower than the other councils on the South Island. After discussions with management and the valuer, the unit rates were revised, resulting in a $140 million increase to the valuation report. 85 of that relates to the current year and 135 relates to the period before that. The magnitude and the nature of the uplift relates predominantly to unit cost input rather than to any other changes such as growth in the roading networks or improvements to the level of service. Inquiries of the valuer indicated that the rate used in the previous valuation was not supportable by market information, and a reasonable portion of that uplift should have been recognised in prior periods. This has been appropriately flowed through the annual report, and we are comfortable with the disclosures that have been included. We looked at 4 areas of judgment within the council's financial statement, which included the valuation of PPE for items that are being revalued, as Jason says, that's done on a cyclical basis. So ones that are revalued, we looked at the valuation of property, plant and equipment that is not revalued in the current year. We looked at employee entitlements and the useful and economic lives of property, plant and equipment. And we are comfortable that the judgments made around these are balanced. And that, I think, is all I need to say on the audit process. I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful, thank you, Chantal. I've been with us today to explain, you know, what is by virtue of this quite technical data that you're providing for us.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So I'll just check in with councillors to see if they've got any questions further on the audit process. So open the floor, councillors. I think it's important to note, you know, there has been through the Audit and Risk Committee on 2 occasions prior to getting to this point to, and that's been quite helpful. We've had Chantal in the room on both those occasions to work through the issues from a technical legal perspective as far as adopting the annual report. So if there is no questions, that means you've clarified it in the minds of councillors, and I guess certified also that the information that we are adopting actually meets the criteria of the Act as well, which is really important for us as governors, but actually the district that we're serving as well. So thank you. Yeah, do you want to have got anything to add from an audit and risk perspective, Fiona?
Well, I just want to thank Chantal and Jason and the team, because it has been a process and there's definitely been some challenges, but I think it's been important how well everybody's worked together. It's not been a hammer waved over people's heads. It's a team effort to ensure that we get the best report for our people and to meet our obligations. So it's been a process with a lot of challenges, but thank you. So I would like to move that we accept the annual report.
Thank you, and the summary, yep,
Yep.
ending June 2025.
One.
Thank you, thank you, Fiona. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Robbie. Jason Robbie just there. Anyway, so we do have a mover and we have a seconder. Thank you, Robbie, that we adopt the annual report and a summary for the year ending June 2025. So all in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you again. Fiona said it, but it's reinforced by all massive amount of work that seems to come around quicker every year. And the technical analysis, actually probably that threshold seems to change. And so, you know, the pressure is on everybody, but I just, want to acknowledge you both. But actually the team that sits behind you as well. So thank you. With that, thank you. Great to have you with us. So councillors, that is our decision item for today, and we now go into our presentation process. And got in the room Councillor Claire Mackay. So welcome, Claire. Is John not coming?
I think he was, but I can't remember what's going on.
Okay. Right, okay. Thanks, Chantal. Thanks, Jason.
I'm presuming he's not out there.
Not really good. Did he just, yeah, maybe we better.
Well, I've texted him and he hasn't responded.
Right. I think there is, he would have to come through roadworks. So I think there's still roadworks north of the Hiranui.
Oh, okay.
So maybe, but he would have dealt with teacher.
Yeah, we should have
Okay.
texted.
Anyway, Claire, as always, great to see you. You're looking Christmassy, which is great. Oh, well done. Summary. That was the first thing I thought of when you were coming through the door. So I was like, oh yeah, she's all good. She's got a Christmas tree up, so that's good. It's the assumptions. You never can trust assumptions. Yeah. Anyway, Claire, and for new councillors, we have a regular spot where we exchange views, get updates from our regional councillor, and Claire has served us extremely well for 2 or 3 terms, and we've got to know Claire and the way she works, and she's got to know us and the way we work as well. And I think that given the information and the media attention that has been thrust on on our business, our shared business together, I just want to acknowledge how well I think we work and how well Claire works for us as a regional councillor. So I just wanted to put that out there, Claire, because I know it's we're on a pretty tough old journey, aren't we, really? And there's probably remains more questions than answers, you know, and I'm mindful of yours and your colleagues, having had some discussions with some of them last week as well. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge what you've done for us and will continue to do. So thank you. But there's probably some new faces around the table for you, Claire, you know, so and we've got 3 councillors not able to be with us today. Vince is not with us, Dave Hislop's not with us, and Tom Davies. So we've got 3 councillors absent and not able to be with us today. But we've got a good team here. So perhaps it might be a good idea to just a quick introduction. I know we'll be doing this a little bit today, councillors, but this is what we do on our presentations day, and it's nothing nicer to know where people come from and where they're anchored in our district. So Pauline, I'm going to start with you again.
Congratulations on your re-election. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you.
And I think that's all I probably need to
Yeah,
say.
that's right. Thanks, Pauline, and Fiona's.
Probably much the same. Well,
Yeah, that's right. But Chris, if I can just turn to you as a
Real quickly again,
Yeah.
I'm Chris Carthy, I'm from West Ward, first time in the room. There you go. Nice to see you. I voted for you, so.
Chris lives out Pyramid Valley.
Yeah, I'm here in
Okay, yeah. Just to
I
get it.
bought the Earl of property. The Earl homestead
Oh,
20 years ago.
Okay, yeah,
It was 20 years ago.
right. Sounds good. Thank you. Steve.
Steve Hart, South Ward Councillor, first.
Chris Scarlett is met him a couple of
We
times.
have met.
Yeah. Brett Jones, South Ward, first term.
Lovely boys, I'll be back, never doubt.
Great. And you know the
And-
rest of us.
Well, yeah, and I just guess from my perspective, I know.
Yeah, I'll hand over to you, Claire, and then we'll see. I do have a question that's come through from Vince. And so, but we'll hear from you first and then see where that takes us, eh?
Okay. Yeah, look, just for the benefit of the new councillors sitting at the table, I did see several of you at the meeting here in Emberley for the candidates meeting. But yeah, my name's Claire Mackay and I am a 4th term councillor now on the regional council. Background very much in agribusiness and interested in the particularly provincial parts of our region. Notwithstanding that, it's important because a big chunk of the constituency for me is, of course, Waimakariri district with Rangiora and Kaiapoi, so quite a big urban population there that relies on public transport. Yeah, basically, my professional background was as a veterinarian, had 20 years as practicing veterinarian business owner in Northland, and then my husband and I moved down here in 2000. We moved our dairy enterprise down to Cuss, so still living there, exiting the industry, trying to retire, I guess you could say, but I'm sort of stuck with this role, so I'll be in it for as long as I may be in it. Yeah, so anyway, that's me in a nutshell. Look, I did think John was going to be here today. And I'll just check one last time to make sure there isn't any reply. So I'm not quite sure what was happening. The agreement that John and I have come to is that I will be the primary person in the Gov2Gov, but he will probably come along. When he's available. I do know that both of us did have a conflict this morning, so I'm not sure whether we decided to go to the other one or not, but I would have thought he would have.
So just for information, Councillor John Faulkner's just recently been elected to Environment Canterbury, but he is a resident and business owner in our district, so he lives
north of Covenant.
Yeah, so dairy farmer, and so yeah, he's first time to the table at Environment Canterbury, so just to fill in that gap. Yeah,
And
Thanks,
I'm very pleased to have him
Yeah.
sitting at the table alongside us too. So, look, I'm sure John will be in at some stage, and he can introduce himself and his responsibilities. So, yeah, just to fill you in on our elections, we did have 4 councillors retire themselves, that didn't stand again, and they were all out of the city. And then post elections, 2 councillors did not get re-elected. So that, and also one of our Ngāi Tahu appointed councillors withdrew himself from their appointment process. So basically we've got 7 new councillors around the table of 16. So 5 of those are in the city, and of course John and Ngāi Tahu appointed one new Ngāi Tahu appointed councillor. So we're having some pretty intense introductions and briefings and things to get everybody up to speed at the moment. In our election process, hopefully you'll have read in the paper or heard that we have elected a new chair, and that's Dr. Dion Swiggs. And Dion was our deputy chair in the previous term, or the latter half of the previous term of council. Unanimous support for that position, and I think if anybody around the table, he's the right person to be in there, and so definitely 100% supportive of him in there. I guess it's from outside looking in, and I'm sure he will agree that it's been a baptism by fire for him in that role, and he has also picked up the regional sector chair role as well. So that is quite at the National Council. So that's quite a feather in his cap as well. And that adds to his workload, but it also does mean that we're at the front of everything, and perhaps for the Canterbury region, we've got some access to ministers that we might not ordinarily have. But that, we'll have to see how that plays out. So our council's decided that we will start off the term certainly with the committee structure that we had in the previous council. The only change we have made is around our core leads. Now, I was a core lead last year of environmental regulation and protection, and we also have a core leader for our rivers and resilience, or resilience, community preparedness and hazards portfolio, and also our public transport. And they fed into the committee structure. This year, the chair and the council have elevated them. The core leads now are answerable to the council and will report directly to our council. And I have actually been elected back into that core lead role of environmental regulation protection. So that's an area that I'm particularly keen on and interested in, but nerdy around the RMA and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so a lot of work for me to do and for our organisation to do, particularly around improving our consent and compliance area. It seems to be the nub of issues for many of our people that have to deal with us through consents. So, and I'm back on as a member of the CE Performance and Remuneration Committee, and I'm also back as RHC Chair, and John is actually my deputy in there. So pretty much from me, back into the roles I probably like and have experience in. So, and John is, he's got some roles up here in biosecurity advisory groups and catchment groups. So John and I are going to share some roles, and he'll be primary and I'll be secondary in some of them, but for this one I'm going to be primary. So I've got a couple of things. Just want to say that we are doing, probably a bit like you guys, doing our annual plan briefing and workshops at the moment. Our staff have come to us, and our early drafts, I think we're on to workshop 4 tomorrow, looking at a figure, they've got 2.9% on the paper as their starting point, so hopefully we can keep it around that, close to that figure. But probably even more so than you, our work programs are extremely fluid at the moment. So what we see written on the paper on a Monday is not necessarily what we actually get to do on the Wednesday at the moment. So yeah, things are just changing almost by the hour. But one thing that we are going to make sure that we get done before Christmas is have our nitrate emergency briefing papers, which was spun out of one of the last motions that occurred at our last council meeting. So we're doing a lot of strategic stuff. We're reviewing the strategic work we did around being a future fit local government and our role in that, but also around annual plan and thinking about what a long-term plan might look like after the next week. So yeah, probably no different to you guys. Yeah, and I guess the elephant in the room, I guess a little bit, which you touched on before, Molly, is the local government reform and last week's discussion paper that dropped out. Felt like it's come, the form has come before the function, which is not the normal way one would consider these things. I think what I would say is that my impression is that we are the foil for local government restructure, because the way they've written the proposals is very much a local government restructure, a bigger local government restructure there, which aligns with what the previous government was talking about. It aligns with what the local government themselves have acknowledged and have done discussion papers on, particularly for the previous government. It aligns with what the regional sector has also done with this Castellio report. So I don't think there's any of us that say that some reform or some efficiencies or there's things there that need sorting, and funding is certainly one of the issues, and it doesn't seem to even be mentioned very much at the moment. Yes, it's almost silent on that. So yeah, we're very cognizant of that, just like every other TI, I should imagine. I think just for the new councillors sitting at table, if I just sort of outline effectively what a regional council does, which is quite different to a TA. We have responsibilities around managing the environment, so resource management, particularly our freshwater, our biosecurity and biodiversity to a degree, though we tend to partner, that's a dual responsibility. But certainly from a biosecurity, Environment Canterbury and all regional councils actually, where the pests like wildings and wallabies are an issue, they take on those responsibilities for the national programs. But certainly Environment Canterbury has the regulatory functions, planning compliance and consents and compliance around the resource management area. And I guess the second part of the stool, if you call, or second leg of the stool, I guess, is around that community preparedness. So the river resilience, protection and erosion, flood control stuff. And then of course our biggest expenditure in the regional council currently is our public transport. 47% of our expenditures in public transport. So that's like the three legs of the stool. Public transport, we are actually as a council looking at is there some opportunities, and we believe there is, for an alternative governance and operational mould, if you like to call it, or that, or model that public transport could be put into, including community vehicle trusts and token mobility as well. And so in essence, that will basically be an initial conversation I understand is already going on as a result of a motion that Peter Scott put on our table, Councillor Peter Scott, with Waimakariri Cell and Christchurch City around that. That was front and centre when the previous Mayor Leanne Zell was in the city. She was keen to do that, but there didn't seem to be a real appetite. But I think now is the time to actually, given the government's directive, that we can really get that moving. So that's a piece of work that's in its early stages. So from our council perspective, we definitely agree that local government needs reform. And as I said, we've asked for different things, and the key issues, I think that we just need to highlight them in some of our submissions going back. Our council, we've accepted that we know regional decisions need regional accountability, and we think, and this is written on paper, so it's not my personal opinion, this is a council position, that the best approach is made by people elected by and accountable to the region. So we're not, at this point in time, we are yet to be convinced that a committee primarily representing individual districts is probably not the way that we see it going, or that we would probably be, our first choice. Now, and I know that you asked this comment me back, but look, I think there's a range of views at our table, and certainly a range of feelings from councillors sitting at the table, and we haven't had the opportunity to have a full council discussion yet. It is scheduled, I think it's for a Thursday, so we'll be actually thinking about that, and we do have a briefing coming up on Wednesday around the strategic stuff we've done, and I'm quite happy to actually circulate that again. So perhaps I could email it to Graham and you can circulate that. It's our thinking, because we have done quite a bit of strategic work on this over the last year. Yeah, probably even more than a year really we've been thinking about it, but certainly it's documented, it's in briefings, it's on record. So
I think Chair Pauling led a lot of that discussion at the last triennium. So.
Yeah. And the mayoral forum itself would have been updated with that. So look, we will need to carefully work through what it all means for our communities and for our organisation, particularly partnership with Ngāi Tahu or the Runanga is very important. So our organisation will be thinking about the impact there as well. As I said before, we certainly think that we need to be having this discussion, but we do think it's premature to be thinking about form before we actually get that clarity on our function, which by all accounts is going to come the week of the 8th, whether it's the 8th or later in the week, who knows. But there's certainly been lots of signals from a rural regional council perspective that there's going to be significant changes in the planning, consenting and likely to be in compliance throughout who has those functions. But I think, in my opinion, someone or some entity is still going to need to do the regional stuff or the cross-boundary functions. So our river works, our biosecurity stuff, and also, because who's going to do, where's the monitoring and the science work going to sit? So I think we need to acknowledge where does that fit in the bigger picture of the economic and development activity that needs to occur to enable livelihoods, vibrant communities and good futures for us. So yeah, I think the future definitely feels like we're going to have to work very closely together with our TA partners across the region, iwi and certainly communities to decide what that care structure looks like to get the outcomes that the ministers are actually wanting, which is greater efficiency and cost effectiveness for ratepayers, and it's going to be a real challenge.
And we're dynamic time, aren't we? Really?
Yeah.
And I mean, until the legislation is set and done for us over RNA reform and how that might sit, and then the restructural, the reform and then the rate capping. I mean, they're all sort of folded in together. They're all intrinsically linked, and like what we are actually, So it's difficult to separate things out into silos. So yeah, well, and it is a dynamic time, but
And I think, if I may, sorry,
Yeah, you go.
I think, you know, the feedback that we give on the 20th from our council's perspective, we would have to ask why we've been excluded from the discussions, because that's certainly where the experience and the expertise sits in the governors. And that's, you know, no disrespect to the mayors, but you've already got quite big jobs, and then to take mayors or a delegate out and then put them in, put them into
No,
another government's arrangement.
Say what you feel, it's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
put them into
Yeah.
another government's arrangement. It'll be a bit too soon. Put them into another government's arrangement and expect them to pick up the lead that we would do. And then sort of sit back and think, as a ratepayer, actually, where's the efficiency or the cost effectiveness out of that when you're going to actually pay them exactly the same, presumably. So yeah, really, really interesting space to be in. For me personally, if it's 3 months on there or 3 years, that's fine. But what I will want to see is better governance than what we've got. And you know, I know that governance is not always easy. It's not very easy at a regional council sometimes with the political aspects. But yeah, if you're going to replace something, it needs to be better.
Yeah, that's right. Any reform change
Yeah.
needs to bring betterment, doesn't it, really, you know, I mean, because it's the nature of the beast, isn't it? But Claire, look, I really appreciate you giving us a bit of an outline and I guess a perspective from a regional councillor elect. And you've got some wisdom and you know, some history to bring in, but you know, some of your counterparts are new into this, and that's, you know, that's a big step and a big uncertainty, I guess, in their minds as well as their desire to make a difference. So yeah, appreciate you giving us that bit of feedback, I guess. And is there any questions for Claire in that regard? You know, just bearing in mind that she will not have the answers because she doesn't know what the shape of the future is. But you know, a comment or anything from councillors. Other than that, I'll try and endeavour to provide an insight from Vince, and I'm mindful that you won't have the answer to that, but maybe if you could just come back and email, that would be helpful. There's no questions for Claire. So the question I had raised from Vince was, and he'd been speaking with or maybe one of his constituents had contact with Cliff Thomas, the river engineer, and the question was really related to that irrigation consents continue to be granted, yet with shifts in the river or our greater rivers, you know, and after rain events when their intake becomes a stranded intake because the river is pushed across the other side. And the concern really was how do we manage that in a different manner? I think you probably had a conversation with Vince as well.
Yeah, I think what Vince was saying is up till recently, they were able to maintain if it shifted, but that's now been removed from the consent, so they're unable to maintain them. And it was just looking for some understanding on that, knowing you wouldn't have the answer today, potentially.
Thank you. Can I just suggest that perhaps that constituent or that applicant calls me?
Okay.
Because I'm surprised that it's actually been removed, but I understand that sometimes they require a separate consent which then allows them to do river works to maintain intakes. So there's a problem on our braided rivers, but a lot of them have separate works, and often it's tied into fish bypass as well, because if you're going to have a fish bypass, that also has to be connected back to the main, I won't say mainstream, but to significant water stream. So,
okay.
I'm not quite sure which river it's on, whether it's on the lower Hurunui or whether it's on the Waiau, but
didn't say.
No.
I think it would be on the lower Hurunui.
Yeah, I suspect it might be.
Yeah, just knowing the constituent without naming anybody, but I'm pretty sure that's what it might be. So, but maybe Fiona or I will get back to Vince and the
Yeah.
constituent can ring you directly
Yeah.
and probably give you more details of what way.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we've probably canvassed a bit of territory. And if there's no further questions, we have got another deputation to at 10:45, so it's timely that we need a bit of morning tea. But you're very welcome to join us for morning tea, but we will need, councillors, we will need to be back in here by 10:45 to receive our next deputation. So feel free to make the most of the next 10 minutes. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you very
And
much.
if I don't see you or we won't see you, I do hope Christmas brings you whatever Christmas means to you and your family. And yeah, we'll look forward to working with you next year and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. So we're now at 10:45 and we have got a deputation from Mr. John Wayers. Lovely to see you again, John. And I think you know everybody around the table. Have you?
We've got a few new ones.
Yeah.
Oh, you, okay, so this is the first time inside this triennium. So maybe we'll all do a quick introductory round so that you get to know who the new councillors are. But I would just say we've got 3 councillors away today. Councillor Tom Davies, Councillor Dave Hislop and Councillor Vince Daly were not able to be with us today. But you do have the pleasure of meeting our 4 new councillors. So that's fantastic with some obvious experienced returning councillors. So we will do a quick introductory round just before you get your 10 minutes. So we'll stick to our deputation time frame. So 10 minutes for your presentation and then 5 minutes for councillors to ask questions of an inquiry or to clarify the position. I'm not aware of what you're speaking about today, but no doubt we'll hear in a minute, so that's good. But I know you know Pauline well and you know Fiona well.
Yes.
So Chris, I'll start with you.
I'm from Westward, I live up Primavera.
Chris, how are you?
I'm good, nice to meet you.
And you?
Thank you, Chris and Steve.
Yes, we have met, yes, yeah.
Chris Scarlett, Westward up YO Mount Life Advice.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, John, South Ward, Brett Jones, first time councillor.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know Robbie. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, and you know the rest of the staff around the room as well. So, John, I'll hand over to you, and as I said, 10 minutes. Graham's probably got his counter on, which is helpful, thank you. And the buzzer will go off, and then we'll have some question time. So, thank you. The floor is yours.
I'll just hand this out to our new councillors. I've got 4 copies.
Might be helpful, perhaps if we get a copy for transparency to Graham, and that can be distributed to all councillors. Just, I just think that's improved.
Okay,
Yeah, that
yeah.
might be helpful.
So that's the information from the last deputation I did, and the letter that I presented from our barrister and solicitor, Helen Atkins, who is also a DC commissioner. So I passed that out, and I also have a copy of the letter that reply from you, Murray. Thank you for that, and which I've attached to that as well. So just to get, this is obviously about the DC funds, government contribution funds, and on the front page of this thing, which I passed out, it says that development contributions, this since July 2003, is a new funding tool for territorial authorities, councils facing significant growth-related costs in their districts, and its important role in keeping growth communities supplied with infrastructure that supports their wellbeing, attractiveness, and ongoing vitality. So that's the purpose of DC funds. Now, so at my last deputation, I presented you with that letter, and in relation to the use of DC contributions to fund the construction of a high-end, fully irrigated and contoured cricket ground, utilising the majority of available space on the Eastern Reserve, and asked for a response that justified using those funds based on growth. I got that reply from the Mayor, as I said, so thank you for that, Madam Mayor. Legal advice suggests your response, Madam Mayor, does not show a causal link between the cricket development and the growth of the district. The cricket club has now not been in action for 10 years, despite the existence of their home ground in Amberley Domain, which they did utilise successfully by hosting other Canterbury teams throughout the 24-25 season. I will ask the council to please provide evidential justification in writing to the spending of developer contribution funds on a cricket ground development due to growth. And I would like that evidential justification in writing as stated within 7 working days. So basically we're going back to where we were, but now I'm looking for some evidence to support that previous communication. We have a few minutes left, so if the new councillors might want to have a moment to read through those documents, I'm happy for them to do that.
Great. 6 minutes left, so feel free to have a read, councillors, and then I will ask if you have questions.
No.
Take questions in 1 moment. Just make sure everybody's completed. You know, it's really difficult, councillors, to read a paper
under pressure and to actually feel informed by having that quick read of that information. So we will get that circulated by the minutes, or by email, I should say. So if you're satisfied that you've been able to read that intent of those, the first letter, which was following the deputation, back on the 30th of September, I think it was, and the response that I provided within the 7 days timeframe that was requested, and that letter is based on some legal opinion that we received as well. So just for councillors for clarity around that. But Chris, we're still within our delegation timeframe, but I'm happy to start questions. But please just make sure, councillors, that the questions that you'll be asking will be questions of clarification.
That's what I'm asking.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. John, thank you. Bear with me with my slight ignorance. So that from what I'm understanding, you're asking to come back again for clarifications of the expenditure. Is that what I'm understanding? You wish us to delve to you're uncomfortable with the response that you've had and you need more information.
I don't believe that that letter actually gave any evidence or justification to why for that spend.
Sure, broad stroke. Okay, that's my question. I just need to clarify. Thanks, John. Thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions, councillors? Thank you, Steve.
Just for clarification, again, not having been part of this process previously, the village green is the centre for receiving the development contributions. And within the village green, there are different parts of the village green, which would be toilets and the cricket ground would just form part of that overall package. I'm making an assumption here, I don't know if that's correct.
I'm going to get Hamish to actually respond to the allocation of funding for development contributions, because there are different aspects of development contributions can be used on different or fitting within different criteria. So rather than, if you're happy to provide that level, that would be good. Thank you.
So there's a development contribution to fund 90% of the development of a recreational reserve, a large recreational reserve on the east side of town. That money has been applied to the village green, and it is for the full development of that reserve. So it includes sporting activities, playgrounds, toilets, walking track, whatever else goes on that reserve. It is a recreational reserve, and it's appropriate recreational facilities.
That would include the Amberley cricket ground. Thank you.
Inclusive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hamish, for that. Just to provide that clarity question. So, is there any other questions from councillors? And most, I'll come back to the deputation actually. No? Okay, silences. You understand the intent, and John, you've come today looking for more explicit justification for the use of development contributions on the village green.
Yes.
And you're also requesting that that will be provided within a 7-day timeframe. I will, of course, seek further advice on this, and I will do my very best to furnish your request in 7 working days. But you'll need to bear with me that this is also a really busy time for us as well. So
Appreciate that.
I will seek advice if we need to seek further legal advice. That becomes at a cost to council as well. But I will have that conversation and respond accordingly. Thank you.
Could I just ask, John, is there a reason for the 7 days? Is there something that triggers off that 7-day requirement, or that's just a number that you picked that you think is appropriate?
I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. If there is nothing more, are you satisfied that you've given us your intent of this discussion today, John?
Yeah, as I said, I really just want evidential justification, really. That's based on the information from Helen Atkins. She felt that there was no real justification there and we wanted to see more.
All right, and I guess, you know, it's important for everybody to understand there will be some cost to council to receive that, if that legal opinion that needs to be sorted, we haven't got the ability to manage that within house. But we've received it in good faith, John. My intent will be to furnish your request in good faith as well. And the 7 days, I'll do my very best to manage that. But if you, just in case, I'm asking for some grace around that as well. But
that'll be fine.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks very much indeed. Appreciate you coming in to talk to us, and we look forward to seeing you at some other place and time. So thank you. In the meantime, if I don't see you before, have a lovely Christmas. It's not that far away.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. That's
And good luck with your in your new roles.
Lovely, thank you. I'll give that back, the paper copy. Thank you. But if we get that circulated by email to councillors, that'd be fine. Okay, so councillors, we know that our 11 o'clock, Mr. John Priest is not able to be here. We are expecting Dr. Rod Carr at 11:15. So we haven't got anything else that, is there anything that you want to? No, nothing we can fill this space with. So how about we just adjourn? Oh, sorry, Robbie.
Oh, just gonna, if I had the opportunity to ask a question that I asked in there around the development, maybe should give us a bit of insight.
So is this a question,
No,
official part of
Yeah.
the meeting? Or is this some other thing that
It
you're
doesn't
proposing?
need to be, but
I would like to adjourn, I
Yes,
think.
fine.
I would like to adjourn for 15 minutes, and I expect if you're going to leave the building, you need to be back here by 11:15, because we do have Dr. Rod Carr coming to speak to us. So council will be adjourned until for 15 minutes. Welcome back, councillors. But this is a very special day to have Dr. Rod Carr with us and Chris. And you know, this has been a long held dream, I guess. I think it was probably this time last year, Rod, you and I were sitting together at the Christchurch Town Hall at the climate change launch, and we started chatting about things, and then I heard that, you know, you own a bit of property in the Hiranui district, or your family, Chris. Yeah, and so And I just felt it was a really great opportunity through that conversation to have you come and present to councillors, you know, because your professional history working with unique, I guess, but not unique now, you know, low emission economies, and how do we actually progress, and how do we advance that thinking within districts, and there may be different opinions around the table around that as well, which is absolutely fine. But you know, I feel really privileged to have had a couple of conversations with you, Rod, and for you to, you know, grant us some of your time today and to bring us some more Chris with us is fantastic. So thank you. So we've got about 45 minutes set aside. We plan to head through to about midday, and perhaps it would be fitting for you to meet some of my colleagues around the room here, and then I'll just hand it over to yourself, and you can tell us whatever story you want to tell us, and then we'll ask some questions about that. Perfect. How does that sound for you?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, can I start with you, Pauline?
Thank you. Hi team. Pauline White, third term councillor, and I did spend a little bit of time actually on the climate change committee. I can't remember what it was now, what it was called now in Christchurch, when you were involved a little bit back there. So yeah, we've crossed paths. So.
Nice to see you again.
Fiona Harris, East Ward, fifth term councillor now, so I think I've been a part probably of conversations and some presentations you've made, and it's always interesting.
Chris Garfield, I live up in Burwood Valley, organic farmer and first term.
Thanks, Chris.
Steve Hutt, South Ward councillor, first term.
Chris Scarlett, West Ward councillor, first term.
Hello there, Brett Jones, first time councillor here in the South Ward. Thank you.
Robbie Burton, South Ward councillor. And I think we've got some of my colleagues.
Yes, we have. I was just going to say that we have 3 councillors not able to be with us today. Councillor Dave Hislop, Councillor Tom Davies from Hamner Springs, or Dave's from Medbury Dairy Farmer, and Tom's from Hamner Springs, and Councillor Vince Daly is from Cheviot. So we're 3 short today, but that's the way it is. And of course our staff sitting around the room. I know you know Hamish. Dan Harris is the Chief Operations Officer over here, and Judith Batchelor is Chief Community and Strategy. And of course I've got Graham here to my left, who is the anchor man for all of us. So, you know, we're lucky to have him. Yeah. So look, Rod, are you happy we call you Rod?
Yes, absolutely.
Or, you know,
yeah, even my grandchildren call me Rod. So
okay.
No granddad in my family.
Rod and Chris, so welcome to you both, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
So let me do a quick introduction in a little bit. It's nice to be back. I actually had the pleasure of being here when Susan Goodfellow presented on the Energy Hub way back, which I got involved with in 2019. And we were spinning up Cape Valley and what's the options and alternatives, and understand now that they're going to put in the line and get the power out of the valley, which is, you know, all credit to those who are involved in getting a decision out of that. So we talk about that, what that means. But actually, Chris is the one in the family who has property at Mount Lyford, so he can tell his own story. Some of you have met me before, others may not, so I'm not going to take anything for granted. I have a backstory that includes time at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, time as Vice Chancellor of the University of Canterbury, 5 years as the founding chair of the New Zealand Climate Change Commission. I've pretty much completed my work on public policy advice, both at the United Nations and to the New Zealand government on the changing climate, what it means for emissions reductions and living with the changing climate. So we can talk about all that if you want to. But my next stage of my life has been to help Chris with the family company called Power, which does solar as a service. We can talk a little bit about how the electricity decarbonisation pathway is playing out globally, nationally and locally. But I was also recently appointed as a trustee of the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, and I now know more about hedgehogs than I ever thought I needed to know. Nasty little things they are, actually. They really like our native skinks quite a lot. So in caricaturing who I am, people get very confused because they don't know whether it's the banker in me, my first career in commercial banking, investment banking, wealth management, the regulator in me, who imposed all sorts of things on New Zealand's banks, the greenie climate commissioner who wanted us all to do things differently because, but in my next stage of my life, it's actually there are real business opportunities in the decarbonisation of society and the economy. Set aside whether it's morally the right thing to do or not, but actually the technologies that have now been developed that enable decarbonisation through electrification are becoming compelling globally and nationally, irrespective of what you believe about carbon dioxide in the air. So we can talk a bit about that as well. But the next stage of the kind of my life is getting stuff done. Right, kind of all the advice that needs to be given has been given. All the people who are likely to listen to it have listened to it, and now it's a matter of saying, well, where are the business opportunities to actually do good by the planet, but also make some money out of this, because it is going to happen. It's going to happen at pace. It's going to happen at scale. It's going to happen right here, not somewhere else. So let me do a bit of a high-level storytelling on the changing climate, resilience, and adaptation. The science is pretty clear, right? We could negotiate that, but that's a bit of a fruitless thing. The reality is that the combustion of fossil fuels in the open air, let's forget about cows and methane and all that stuff, but the combustion of fossil fuels in the open air at the pace and scale we do it as humans has added to the amount of carbon dioxide in the air to the extent that even if we stopped it tonight, the planet will continue warming this century. Right? That's baked in. That baked-in change in climate will melt all the glaciers that feed the rivers of the Indus Valley by the end of the century. And that is the drinking water and water for agriculture for hundreds of millions of people. That is done. Right? That is not something you can negotiate with. The atmosphere was holding more carbon dioxide. It will be warmer. The glaciers are melting and they feed the rivers. And once the glaciers are gone, the water doesn't flow. So there are going to be water wars. Pakistan and India, Bangladesh and India, and China and Tibet. Right? So fortunately, they're a long way from here. Right? We don't necessarily have to care or worry about that, or do we? That's the second thing. As a result of that, the world is investing massive amounts of money in decarbonising electricity production and getting fossil fuels out of transport. So again, whether you like EVs or not, they are coming at you like a freight train because India and China need to stop burning petrol and diesel on the ground. And they are making massive state-based investments in low and no emissions transport. So that's just Tata Corporation brought to market an internal combustion engine car for middle-income Indians in 2005. They were late to the game and they sold it for the equivalent of 3,000 New Zealand dollars. They are going to launch a battery electric car at a comparable price point for India. And by the way, India drives on the same side of the road as we do. So if you think importing second-hand Japanese cars is cheap, you'll be able to buy a brand new one with the same performance from India. Yep, and it will work at less than it will cost for a comparable performing internal combustion engine car by 2028. And that is a game changer because the cost of keeping an electric car on the road is a fraction of the cost of keeping an internal combustion engine car on the road. India is not doing it to save the world, they're doing it to save themselves. And China will do the same thing, except they're into global domination, right? The Chinese are going to do it subsidized with state money in order to destroy the American motor vehicle manufacturing industry. So the benefit for New Zealand is we don't have a motor vehicle manufacturing industry to protect. We have motor vehicle importers, and we have those involved in the distribution of petrol and diesel and the maintenance of all those old cars. But we don't manufacture any of it, and we're very unlikely to. So coming back up to the higher level, what matters in the world happens in New Zealand as well, whether we like it or not. Give you a bit of an update on Chinese electrification. So China is still opening about 2 coal-fired power stations every week. This can't be good. Trouble is they're closing about 3 a week. And they're closing the old, inefficient, badly operated, 50-year-old, well, it's about as old as Huntly power stations are getting closed in India, in China, sorry. And the new power stations that do burn coal are low emissions, high performing, very efficient. So it's not one for one. Last year, the world had the capacity to manufacture 1 terawatt of solar panels. 1 terawatt, if you run solar panels 1,500 hours a year, that's about 1,500 terawatts of electricity. New Zealand used 45 terawatts last year, right? So the global capacity to manufacture solar panels was nearly double the amount of solar panels deployed last year, which is why the Chinese government are going back to their solar panel manufacturers and saying, unless you can show us an order book for 60% of your output to be sold in the next 12 months, we're withdrawing your license to manufacture, because they're undercutting each other. Okay? So the solar panel thing is amazing. Its scale, the cost of the solar panels has come down by nearly 93% in the last decade. So it is now 7% of what it was 10 years ago. That the Chinese solar panel industry deployed about 37 gigawatts of capacity last year alone. So nearly half of all the solar panels made in the world were deployed in China. They're automating the rollout of solar panels. So they've got robots actually installing in these solar panel farms. So solar is real technology. It's available today. It's been scaled. And when it comes to deploying solar panels now, labor is about half the cost of deployment of solar panels. So now it's a matter of, can you get lower labor content, not per hour cost, but lower labor content for your deployments. For greenfield solar farms, less than 4% of the total project cost is the land. If New Zealand was to employ known solar panel technology, we would only need 50,000 hectares of New Zealand's 10 million hectares of pastoral land to generate more electricity than we produced and consumed last year. Now, you've still got the issue of distributing the electricity generated in daylight over the non-daylight hours in use, which comes back to energy storage. And you can store energy in hydro lakes, you can store energy in piles of coal, you can kind of store it in a gas field, but basically once you tap the gas field, you need to keep tucking the gas out of it. It's not a natural storage reservoir. You can store it in biomass, which is blackwood pellets, where you've pyrolyzed the biomass, and it's a stable synthetic coal. But largely the storage thing is coming down to batteries. Can we manufacture a technology for the storage of electricity, particularly within day? So you can do that daylight hour shifting within day. It doesn't solve New Zealand's dry year problem, but we'll come to that in a minute. So globally, huge amounts of money have been spent over the last decade to create energy intensive batteries for devices like your laptop and phone, and mobility like battery electric cars. Very little has been invested relatively in stationary battery storage. Those batteries that you don't care about the weight or the volume because they're going to stay still. So that investment is now scaling up globally at pace, and people are trying to figure out which technologies will give you cost-effective intraday storage of electricity through manufactured battery capacity. New Zealand doesn't have to solve this problem. It will be solved, and we will be a huge beneficiary of that technology. We might luck in and get a sunspot success where one of these technologies emerges from New Zealand, but we don't have to rely on it emerging from New Zealand to be a buyer and user of it. So the decarbonisation through electrification of electricity production is ongoing. Come to New Zealand's story now, forget the world will do what the world will do. Global money is hunting electrification opportunities everywhere, solar, wind, run-of-the-river hydro, biomass, all that stuff. And the devices industry is hunting for more efficient and effective use of electrons as we scale up the use of electricity everywhere. But when it comes to New Zealand's story, of course, we import all of our fossil fuels. Yes, we export coal from the West Coast, but largely that's long-term contracts of supply to steel makers. What we import is oil and diesel, the import value of which is about $4 billion a year, which we retail in New Zealand for about $7 billion by the time you add GST, excise duties, and all the rest of it to it. So there's $7 billion of retail value sitting in petrol and diesel, which is what the electrification of ground transport sees as their opportunity to reduce that cost in New Zealand and make money for the new technologies. So quite a significant opportunity in New Zealand. Of course, you're all aware of the fact our gas fields are not as extensive as the industry assumed they were. We've had water intrusion into one of the gas fields, which has meant that it doesn't work the way they thought it would. Before the oil and gas ban was introduced, there had been no prospecting offshore for 2 years, because basically the world has known reserves of more than 50 years supply of fossil gas. So you don't go looking for the expensive stuff that you don't know about. You go for what do we know, where is it, how do we get more out of where we know it is, rather than speculatively go looking. And it's not as though that Taranaki Basin hasn't been well prospected since the 1970s when Maui was found. If there was another major gas field to find, it would have been found by now. In terms of onshore, they've spent $2 billion doing onshore drilling because that was never banned, and they've got very little finds. So the idea that New Zealand is going to drill its way out of our energy issues is naive, is unhelpful, is a complete distraction. And even the industry told the government that their $200 million taxpayer fund to help look for new gas was actually better spent getting more gas out of the existing fields. Go figure, right? The good news about decarbonisation is there's not only the benefit of more affordable, more resilient energy, but actually getting off combusting the stuff at ground level in our cities is a really good idea, because we breathe this crap. The Climate Change Commission's estimates, along with the Ministry of Health, were that by 2035, if we had reduced our combustion at ground level by about a half, we'd save $2 billion a year in healthcare costs in our health system from respiratory failing as a result of diseases arising from the inhalation of the particulates from burning fossil fuels in transport. So, you know, there are real wins here to move along. When it comes to the Canterbury region, then we are even better placed to take advantage of these new technologies. We don't have a pipe network that we're trying to defend the costs of. We don't have offshore gas fields that we kind of were reliant on, as the North Island was. We already have bottled gas, so if you wanted to swap that out for biogas, we've already got a distribution network that could use biogas for remote uses like the backyard barbecue or the restaurants that desire to have, you know, gas-fired cooking. And the biogas may be slightly more expensive, but if that's the functionality you particularly desire and want, then it's not per gigajoule that matters. It's actually the functionality of having it remotely or having it locally in your backyard. So then you come back to the biggies, right? The opportunity in the Canterbury region is unambiguously solar and wind. When you put up a wind farm in New Zealand, about 40% of the time those turbines are generating. When you put up a solar farm in New Zealand, about 20% of the time the solar farm is generating. Of course, if you put a geothermal field in place, it's generating 8,500 hours a year. It's pretty much full-time, except when you take it offline for maintenance. And hydro dams can be the same so long as the dam is full. It can run 8,500 hours a year, so long as it rains, right? Now, sitting here today, it turns out our lakes are 137% full compared to the average for this time of year. So dry year is not next year. That's probably, if it's going to happen, 2 or 3 years away. And maybe the best option for dry year is a big heap of coal at Huntly, funnily enough. It's probably very unlikely to be a new gas import terminal for hundreds of millions of dollars to put gas in an old gas pipeline, because some pipeline owners want to make some money out of the last leg of their gas infrastructure. South Island doesn't have to address North Island's problems. So solar in the Canterbury region is really interesting because we will end up with some very, very cheap electricity for some parts of the year. Already Hawaii and South Australia have got zero electricity prices in the middle of the summer. Zero electricity prices. So imagine in Canterbury in January, if power was, but for the distribution cost, the energy generation cost was free. What kind of sectors, industries and businesses could take advantage of free power for 6 weeks a year? I don't know the answer to that, but I can sure think there's some brains trying to figure that out. Right? That biomass for energy looks like a pretty inefficient use of biomass. In other words, to grow things like pine trees in order to chop them down, grind them up, pyrolyze, cause them to be synthetic coal, move that around, boil it and burn it in Huntly, looks like expensive, poor use of biomass. Biomass as a permanent store of carbon, blended into building materials like concrete or blended with asphalt for road surfacing, means you suck carbon dioxide out of the air using biology, and you create the carbon which is then permanently stored in the built environment. That's carbon sequestration that even the Europeans will recognise. There are also some carbon depleted soils where you can embed permanently the carbon enrichment in the soils, which improve productivities of the soils, moisture retention in the soils, act as a filter for leaching from soils. So there's some really interesting opportunities in the biochar sector that go alongside withdrawing carbon dioxide from the air. All of those technologies are known. All of those technologies are available. It doesn't require nuclear fusion. Right? It doesn't require a big brain. It requires the mobilization of capital in response to business opportunities and customer demand. And that's what gets me excited about being in Canterbury in the South Island of New Zealand, because these are all going to make us more resilient, wealthier, and attract new and different kinds of industry to our sector, to our whole communities. And we're going to get rid of some of the health consequences of combusting this crap in the world that our children and we live in. So the family company, which Chris started a couple of years ago, basically provides solar as a service, right? It rocks on up to schools, charities, not-for-profits, local governments, and says at no cost to you, we'll put solar on your roof, we'll sell you the power at 10% less than what you pay for the grid power, so you're always going to get cheaper power off your roof. We'll maintain it for 25 years, we'll insure it, we'll give it to you at the end of 25 years, or take it away if you don't want it anymore. And there's a buyout clause after 5 years. So if you decide we're making far too much money and you've got the money, you can just buy it off us at the replacement cost of the kit. So Chris took 6 months to negotiate an agreement with the Ministry of Education. It's the Ministry of Education. And under that contract, basically any of New Zealand's 2,000 schools can sign up to get solar as a service to replace at least some of the electricity they buy from their local lines company. So Rangiora High, Tawhiti, we're on the verge, we've got all the approvals for Hornby to go, up to the North Island, Manurewa Intermediate. So those are some of the schools. The schools are kind of nibbling around. They always hope the Ministry of Education would do it for them for free. Particularly under this government, it seems unlikely anything is going to be for free. And when the ministry do it, they keep all the power savings, whereas when we do it, the schools can choose to take a cash grant in lieu of a discount, and then they get to spend the money on whatever they choose. We also did Whakatane District Council's rec centre on exactly the same proposition. Swimming pools are great. Your local one, unfortunately, has perspex as well as roof, and when you look at the size of the solar array you put there, it probably isn't economic, but we've done some homework. But local government meets all of those requirements, particularly the smaller, not the teeny ones, but the smaller, where they have roof space, they don't have capital, they'd like to get some savings, and they'd like to know that they've done what they could to reduce their dependency on local lines companies, to free up those lines companies to supply power to those who don't have the choice. So we are probably the smallest gentailer in New Zealand. You know, gentailers got a bad rap, but we're the smallest one. We're also probably the fastest growing one, which is kind of cool. And I'm going to let Chris have a say in a minute. But long and the short of it is there are business opportunities springing up all over the Canterbury region to think about applying these new technologies in electricity generation, electricity distribution, devices that will plug in and take electricity. Which leads me to my final one, is about data centers. I just got back from a week in India. One of the gigs I have is I'm a director of ASB Bank, wholly owned by the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. 5 years ago, the Commonwealth Bank decided that it would spin up in Bangalore a back office for their IT shop. So this is not call centers, this is not customer facing. This is the IT shop that does code development, testing, it does anti-money laundering, fraud detection. They now have 7,000 employees. So Commonwealth Bank has 50,000 employees worldwide. 7,000 are now their employees in Bangalore. ASB are going to spin up a team of about 200 to do some work for us. In a 10-kilometre stretch of highway outside Bangalore, there are 1 million IT workers. So you go to India not any longer because it's cheaper, because these people are capable of earning international money. You go there because of capacity, in other words, large numbers of people, and capability. These people have been working on these technologies for the last 5, 7, 10 years. All of the big names are there with multi-tower office blocks, so Google, Amazon, Deloitte, Accenture, they're all there. But the technologies emerging, which all require electricity to run them, will change employment in the Western world within 5 years. Agentic AI is wiping out millions of jobs before the end of this decade, because it is already available, already deployable, a fraction of the cost of the human labour. And it started off by essentially wiping out jobs in the sector that gave birth to computer coding and testing. Because you can build algorithms that do that faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than humans. So at some point, what are called the hyperscalers are looking around the world going, hell's teeth, where are we going to put the data centers that power us? Where are we going to get electricity that is clean and sustainable? And the answer is they are scouting the world for locations. It's all about price. Surprisingly few jobs. When you spin up a 24/7, 365 days a year data center, the biggest job creation is in the building of the data center, not the running of it. These are often like warehouses of computers. But in some communities, 50 jobs makes a big difference. You wouldn't notice 50 jobs in Auckland, but you might notice 50 good paid jobs down the road here. So the hyperscalers are on the lookout. Electricity is the game. New Zealand has a comparative advantage in some types of generation, particularly wind and solar. The world is going to solve the stationary battery issue. The question for local governments such as yours is, you don't have to be at the leading edge, first mover, but you really want to do the environment scanning to know what is happening, where it's happening, and when it might turn up locally, and what you want to choose to happen locally, because you do have the power of the pen to influence what does and doesn't happen in your neighbourhood. So that's our story. What did I miss, Chris? What did I get wrong? Chris is my fact checker. Would you like to contribute?
I mean, it seemed pretty comprehensive to me. I have a much smaller purview at Cog Power. I like to put panels on roofs and help people get generating at their own organizations. That's a pretty good explanation of what Cog Power does. We're sort of sitting around a few years ago looking at the problems that New Zealand faces, that we thought New Zealand faced, and how we were going to get around that. Things like expensive electricity, and how we can distribute the generation rather than building a larger pipe up from the hydro scheme. Things like the actual price that you have to pay, and things like carbon emissions. And a lot of these sort of problems, for us, the solution seemed to coalesce around solar. So we started looking at what the barriers were. And as you might expect, a lot of it was capital constraint. So we started going around to the larger organizations that had big rooftops. Because we weren't interested at that point at putting anything into a field, taking away from possibly productive land. And started signing schools. So the general deal was that we pay to install, insure, maintain the array for 25 years on the schools, and we sell them power at a discounted price. That's pretty much it, right? It's a simple game, and it's all just a finance play, really. And in that way, we got to bring the strain down on the local grid areas. We tend to save, I think Rangiora High, we donated about 10 grand last year. So we saved them on the financial front, and that ended up saving, by our calculations, about 11 tons of CO2 equivalent when we compare the electricity that came out of that array to what it would be, would have been out of the national grid. So it's a simple company. Talking to district councils, we have a functioning array up in Whakatane. I did review Paranui's infrastructure before we came here, at least what's visible to the naked eye. And there might not be anything that we can do here, but still thought it would be worth coming up.
Like the opportunity to come and tell, and also, even if it isn't Hiranui District Council's assets, because you're, there may be other businesses in town, like a supermarket, just got a conversation with South Island Foodstuffs going down. So you know, wear your other hats as well as your local hat. The challenge for New Zealand is about half the cost of your electricity bill is actually the generation of the electrons that go into the wires. But fully half the cost is the lines company. People say, well, where do we make our money? And it's basically, if you cut out the lines company charges, there's enough money left on the table to give the discount for the use of the roof and the use by the customer or client of the electricity that's generated, and to give us a weighted average capital return that justifies our business. And it has the advantage of, if you can do it, you can reduce the strain on the local lines company, because the Achilles heel in this electrification isn't going to be Transpower and generation, because the government has said, we'll write you a blank check to spin up all of the national grid infrastructure that you need. The problem for Transpower now is Transpower has about 50 on-ramps where they drag power from generation, and about 250 off-ramps where they distribute it to lines companies and end users. It's a big change to scale up entry points to the national grid, and quite expensive, about 50 million a throw to scale up exit points from the grid. The trouble is the whole world is buying that technology today. So in the UK now, there is a 6-year delay to connect to the UK national grid. So the constraints are now the availability of the kit to get it done. Another example of kit availability. So the ASB Bank have spun up a green loan for farmers. We'll lend you $250,000 to electrify your farm, interest-free for 5 years. Turns out what the constraint is the transformer on the power pole down the road, because if that hasn't the capacity to take the extra in the time when you've got daylight generation, then you're in trouble. So we've got 3 dairy farmers in a row, and the first one gets to get their loan and get their solar on, and the next one comes along and the local lines company says, well, we've not upgraded the transformer. So lines company capital constraint, as well as the technical supply of kit, is now going to act as a bottleneck on some of this grid connected rather than generation behind the meter for own use. It's all fascinating stuff. We could also talk about nuclear fusion if you want to talk about something that doesn't matter. We could talk about hydrogen production and how the economics of that have been promised for 30 years, but it's still very challenging. Or we can talk about things you could do today and actually have running by Christmas.
Thanks, Rod. Thank you, Chris. Look, I really appreciate the fact that you took us to that international, bring it to a national and bring it down into a district perspective. And I have to say, well, your knowledge is always phenomenal in this regard, but thank you, Chris, also for coming along. So I think it's probably sparked a couple of questions in the minds of councillors, you know, and they might be on topic or they might be off topic, and I'm sure that you will be happy and be able to provide an eloquent answer to either. So we've got about 10 or so, 10, 15 minutes left, and I'm happy to receive any questions that you have, either of what you've heard or you've got an interest outside of what you have heard today that fits in with the adaptation in regard to you know, what we're facing here and in the future. So, councillors, any questions? Thank you, Robbie.
I was going to say, Hamish beat me.
You go first, Robbie, and then I'll go to you, Hamish. Thank you, Robbie.
Just a couple of quick ones. The solar thing, is the technology, and I don't fully understand how it works, but is the technology in that changing, or is this kind of a fixed way that a solar panel turns the sun into electricity? And then I wondered what sort of lifespan there is on that. And the question after that, you know, I really enjoyed your thoughts around, with a long time ago we talked about energy hubs and things, and I'm kind of hoping that if you're going down that $1 million mile in India, that you might mention to one or two a place that you know in New Zealand.
So look, let's do a quick on the solar panels, and I'm going to let Chris sort of fix me where I go wrong. But the first thing is, my understanding is that the current technology for the way we make solar panels has probably pushed itself about as far as it can. That it's a derivative from the silicon wafer manufacturing kind of processes that we were doing for computer chips, which is kind of interesting. But the chips that became the solar cells capture about 22% of the energy available from the photons falling on them. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, have managed to develop chips in the lab that capture about 40% of the energy. But there's a big step to get from the lab to manufacturing that kind of chip at scale and in a commercially viable price point. So at the moment, the panel technology, fixed frame, rigid panel technology, one of the guys building a big solar farm up north wanted to follow his supply chain back to China. So he went back to China to visit the factory where they're manufacturing. I think they're buying 60,000 panels. He said it was just amazing. This factory was less than a year old. It was 3 football fields long. The components were coming in at one end of the factory, and pallets of boxed solar panels were coming out the other end of the factory. And the only people working in the factory were doing quality assurance and machine maintenance. It was entirely automated. So that part of the technology probably getting as good as it's going to. The next trick is to try and reduce the cost of rolling out panels. So investment is being made in essentially carpets of solar cells. So you could literally roll them out off the back of a truck like you were laying carpet. And of course, that reduces the labour cost dramatically if you can find ways of securing them and all the rest of it. The other is adhesive solar panels. So rather than put the rails and frames to hold the solar panels, if you've got lighter weight, you might be able to stick solar capture technology on roofs rather than rails and roofs. But Chris, what am I missing on the tech of current solar panels? And then you can answer that lifetime of a solar panel.
Yeah, no, a lot of that technology is there, as you say, in the labs. The commercial viability, for example, the panels that you can just roll out. And if you have a standing seam roof, it's kind of perfect because you just roll it straight down. But those panels aren't quite as durable. They're not really even panels. Those carpets aren't quite as durable. So you don't get the 25 to 30 years that you would get out of a rigid panel. So the industry standard now is a 35-year production warranty on new panels that come out, new standard panels. As far as the, is it getting better? There's a bit of sort of evolutionary rather than revolutionary progress. I mean, you might see 0.25% to 0.5% increase in efficiency year on year. There'll be little bits and pieces that get fed into it, like they've invented a new black, right, that absorbs a small percentage more of light. So, but the MIT panels, I mean, that would be a huge game changer. Yeah.
But like all these things, being able to manufacture at the price point. So they've got, one of the technologies was the follow the sun panels, right? Where you think, oh, surely if you've got a panel and it could follow the sun, it would pick up more sunlight, you know, if it goes from east to west during the day. Turns out the point of failure in those is the mechanics of moving parts. And so there are solar farms that are stripping out their tracker systems and putting fixed panels back in place because the cost of maintenance exceeded the additional electricity generation. So, you know, not every new move leads to the outcomes that people hope for. So, yeah, solar tracking was like the game because we thought you'd get 20% more power, but maintenance went through the roof.
Thanks,
Really
Rob.
like systems that don't move.
Hannah's just got a couple of questions, maybe. Thank you.
So one's about data centers, Rob, and the water usage for cooling.
Yep.
My understanding is a relatively high water usage for cooling. I mean, obviously, which is industrial heat, we could utilize for something else. But
So a couple of things. Of course, if your power is cheap enough, you use air conditioning. I mean, water is used because it's abundant and free. If it's neither abundant nor free, then if the electricity is cheap enough, I mean, gee, not good news, but they have indoor ski fields in the Middle East powered by oil. Nuts for the planet. But the oil is so cheap and their concern with the environment so low that they make snow in the desert. So the question becomes, yeah, can you use a closed cycle of water so that it picks up the heat and then radiates heat to the air, so the water cools down through the radiation process, and then you can use the same water again. So you're not constantly wanting a flow of new cool water if you can pick up the heat by that process. And then, of course, the question is, can you use the waste heat? Can you have a cogeneration opportunity where you capture the heat out of the data center by warming the water that you then extract the heat from some other process? And so I think all of those ecosystems of use are really kind of fascinating. And there's one that's near you and very top of mind that potentially you could create an ecosystem using the waste heat from the Cape Valley thermal combustion engine of the gas. And at the moment, that waste heat is basically radiated to the atmosphere. So you've got these 20-cylinder engines up at Cape Valley, and now that they're going to put in the line to bring the power out of the valley, they'll scale up the number of engines, could be up to 8 1-megawatt engines, creating 8 megawatts of power every hour, 24/7. But the way those engines have to be cooled is exactly the same as your tractor engine or your car engine, right? They basically circulate through radiators on the roof of the generator to dissipate that heat. Turns out, Cape Valley people, when they bought them, bought equipment that enables heat recovery. And if you had a use for the recovered heat, such as a drying operation, then you'd actually have an ecosystem of electricity generation, as well as the combustion of the methane to get it out of the atmosphere before it gets there, as well as using the waste heat. And those kind of ecosystems are bringing the power out of Cape Valley while you still own the line rather than letting main power have the line, means that at the bottom of the road, you can now create industries that are behind the meter. And you know, that's, yeah, main power would love you to sell them the power so they can sell it back to you. But actually you want to think carefully about what could you put at the end of the line out of the valley that doesn't require main power to intermediate it, that enables you to offer to a data center or some other chosen user electricity at half the price they have to pay if they were buying it from the lines.
That was my first one. The other question I guess is the economics of hydro as a battery. Because hydro, the best use of hydro is the continuous generation 24/7. That's the cheapest electricity it's ever going to produce. If you're turning your hydro on and off, that's actually going to drive up the price of your hydro electricity because you're underutilising your capital investment hydro. So I mean, some people have said to me that actually solar farms will provide you with cheaper electricity when the sun's shining, but the price of electricity when the sun's not shining will be a lot more expensive because the generation costs will be higher.
Until you solve the battery problem.
Yeah.
And again, the thing is about timing. If we're talking about the prices you pay from 6 a.m. in the morning till 9 a.m. in the morning and from 4 p.m. till 8 p.m., that's a battery storage problem, not a hydro lake problem.
Yep.
So for a lot of households, if you look at your lines company charges at 3 a.m. in the morning, they're like ½ a cent a kilowatt hour.
Yep.
If you look at them by 8 a.m. in the morning, they're like 18 cents a kilowatt hour. Batteries will fix that, right? The hydro lake thing is very interesting, a bit of history. So Rob Muldoon famously tore up the contract for Manapori's power supply to Comalco, which was to supply Manapori power to Comalco for 99 years at 1 cent a kilowatt hour. And he just, you and whose army? This is a dumb deal and I'm not honouring it. And of course, at the time, everybody was paranoid that the world wouldn't forgive us and business wouldn't be done because he was a government that disrespected contracts. And guess what? Nobody stopped doing business with us. They all still came. But 1 cent a kilowatt hour certainly reflected the cost of generation from Manapori. And those costs haven't changed much since they started generating power, right? The dam is still a dam. There's a bit of maintenance on the turbines. But largely you can imagine that the economic rents accruing to the owners of the Manapori power station are enormous. If you are going to reprice energy storage, and storing energy costs money, there's no free ride here. However you generate it, either you forego generation in order to store it in a dam, or you import and have as working capital the money invested in a pile of coal. But either way, storing energy costs money. We haven't yet figured out free storage. The lead acid battery technology that a local company is kind of navigating to produce at scale would store electricity at 6 cents a kilowatt. So if you can generate electricity solely about 10 to 11 cents a kilowatt hour and store it for 6 cents a kilowatt hour behind the meter, you've now got 16, 17 cents a kilowatt hour fully loaded stored electricity price to manage through a 24-hour period. That's cheaper than your average lines company cost generation charge. It's not free. There's no free electricity, sorry people.
Fine, thanks. This for your question. Chris, you've got a couple of questions.
So I've been involved with alternative resource before. Has any study been acknowledged in this country in regards to the harmonics? Iran did quite a bit of testing on the harmonics and the spill from the charging and the effects it was having on the community's health, mental well-being, and also the likes of that. Because as we know, the Iranians are very clever people.
Yes.
Very clever.
Very strong mathematics.
Very
strong. Women.
Yes, rightly so. And having dealt with several of them in my capacity, in my profession, that was something that was tabled at a meeting once years ago with me, and I researched into it. I was wondering if that's been drafted, considered, and had.
So the only studies I think I'm aware of are the ones that were done by people or for and on behalf of people living close to the main grid.
Yep. Because
there was a concern there that communities resident close to the national grid were being adversely impacted. The best I can say is I think my recall of that research was inconclusive, which doesn't help you much. It says we can't find evidence. It doesn't say it doesn't. It just says we may be looking in the wrong places. We may not have enough people. If it's 1 in 10,000 people, then most New Zealand communities who live under power lines are probably small in remote areas. So you've always got that data collection problem with local environments, and so I don't have evidence that says that's not the case, but I don't have evidence yet that in the New Zealand context says that is the case.
You did read the reports.
Some of them,
Yeah.
some, I wouldn't say I was an expert on that stuff.
Cool, thank you, Chris.
Appreciate
Brett,
Right, so I can see I've only got 1 minute. Just, just in broad terms, has the environmental cost of manufacturing the panels and the destruction of those at end of life, has that correspondingly gone down as the cost of manufacture has gone down?
So the substrate that they make the panels out of, something like 90% of the substrate in the world comes from one province in China. And that's what worries the Americans, right? Is they want to spin up, even if they do it behind protective tariffs, the capacity to manufacture panels, which they already have, they just don't have it at the same scale as the Chinese. Inverters in particular, because inverters are like the brain that runs all of this. And the concern is that the Chinese, when they send out inverters, have backdoors to them and they'll take control of your grid. So, you know, the inverter and panel business is seen as strategic and comparative advantage. My understanding is that there are some rather nasty acids and chemicals which are used to make this substrate. So how you deal with that waste product in the production has been an issue. I haven't visited the province in China where they do this stuff, but by all accounts, you can do it with much less environmental damage than they have had. I'm sure that the American standards will insist on environmental protections, at least to a greater extent than has been the case historically. End of life is really interesting. You can basically turn them into sand. They're largely glass, and glass is largely silica. So there's, you know, it's what do you do with them at the end of life? Well, they're not like a nuclear power station where you have to shroud it for 1,000 years. Just line them up.
interesting, thank you. Councillor, is there any other questions? Probably you can have the last
I
one.
was going to say, I've only got about 10, at least 10 seconds there. No, you kind of covered it in that too, but I was going to ask about the stakes, but you've done that. But similar to the car type problem, we see the, you know, electric cars, old batteries and all that. Is that an area that they've got on top of there too?
Well, tyres are tyres. I heard the argument, battery electric cars are 15% heavier, so they're going to chew through tyres 15% faster. And then you ask the question, what do we do with our tyres anyway?
No, sorry, it wasn't the tyres so much. I'll use that as an example. Right. We've got to get rid of them somehow, right. The batteries.
Okay,
batteries.
So it turns out lithium-ion batteries have a very good second life in electricity storage. So in Manukau, out of Auckland, they've now got the first New Zealand leaf battery farm. So they take the leaf batteries out of the old leaf cars. And because you don't need the same energy intensity to get a car moving, to keep lights on as you do to get a car moving, you can basically charge these batteries at low electricity cost and discharge them into the peak. And we still don't know what the limit of that life is. We know that batteries in battery electric cars degrade at about 1% per annum, but then plateau. So we've got a 2013 Nissan Leaf, started life as a relatively limited 120 kilometre range on a charge. It's now down to about 75 kilometres and has been there for 4 years. So you clearly get decay and then you get plateau. But you can buy an old Leaf for $2.5 grand at the moment. You're basically buying its battery. So the idea that we need to have cheap, imported, second-hand Japanese cars because New Zealanders can't afford battery electric cars is just not true. So final pitch, if any of you have got businesses or associates with nice roofs near you, let us know and we'll make a pitch to them.
There's a car manufacturer, just saying.
Rod and Chris, I just want to thank you both very much for coming to our council today. You know, having these sorts of forums probably opens our eyes to opportunities and helps our understanding, and I've really appreciated the context of putting it in that global, national and regional context, you know. I hope that, trust that councillors have appreciated, and that's probably
a place to start.
Create, yeah, that's right, create more questions and answers. But thank you both very much, really appreciated your time, and We've got the police here next, and that's no reflection.
Very good. Thanks for your time. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks.
Good luck on the energy sector.
Look at the Amberley's biggest building across the road.
Yeah. Thank you for Thank you, Rod.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we'll keep in contact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Radio, Rob?
Hot seat, hot seat.
Hot seat. Welcome, Rob. It's great to have you with us and to have a bit of a discussion about the issues around, policing and particularly across the Haranui. So I know you're doing a bit of work across the border over there. Selwyn, yep. So it's great that you made time to come back and talk to us.
Always.
Yeah, it's the story. Yeah. So we've got about half an hour, haven't we? Sorry. Yes, we have. So we've got about half an hour. We've got a couple, 2 or 3 questions that have been submitted. But if we perhaps just have a conversation with you, maybe you give us a bit of a theme of what's going on, bearing in mind we are an open session and live stream, so I'll leave that piece of information for you to use that, use your discretion. But we have got a few new members around the table that you may or may not have met across the way. Pauline just, and Fiona, of course, so perhaps a quick introduction, Chris. So he's in Rob. Rob Ellis's patch in Pyramid Valley. Yep.
Right.
Thank you. And we've got Steve.
Steve Hutt,
Steve and
Chris Scarlett, Westwood.
Hey, Rob, Brett, Southwood.
He hasn't got his numbers across his chest or wherever you put that, but Good as. So how about we just throw it over to you, Rob, give us a bit of an insight and then maybe you'll just touch on those questions that have been submitted and maybe some questions from the table. Yeah. Yep, thanks, Rob.
So I'm Rob, I've been Haranui for quite a while now, 2019, I've moved to Cheviot, so now I did 10 years at Amberley and came and went a few times and I'm back here, well not at the moment, but generally based in Amberley looking after the Haranui stations and Oxford as well, but currently working out of Rolleston station, looking after the Selwyn area, which is quite an eye-opener really, quite different down there. It's an interesting area because of the growth. It's massive and it's just like blows my mind. I don't think I want to look at Rolleston myself. It's amazing seeing it, that growth, that level and intensity of growth. It's quite amazing. So yeah, it's a good learning opportunity for me. It's always good to come back and certainly intend to come back up here. Back up this way, but Nathan, you might have met Nathan Wilson, who's doing my job at the moment. He's enjoying the job up here and working with the teams. The police team at the moment, that's one of the questions I think. We have nearly a full team, full strength. We have a full team. There's a reliever in Amberley as the third person. Amberley usually has 3 police and myself working out of the station. That person's tenure comes up in January and just working on whether we can re-advertise that or how that's going to work. That's one of the challenges I think with the review finishing and the outcome of the review, as most people know, is that it was given a big stop now and everything just stays as it is, which is great for Haranui. And for the staff involved especially, it was pretty tough on them going through that process and their families and things, but really great for the area as well, keeping our numbers. I don't know how that's going to look going forward. Say with one vacancy in Amberley not being advertised as such yet, And that may be a bit of a theme going forward, I think. Around Canterbury, review got squashed. However, some vacancies may not get filled or may get distributed elsewhere. So we just got to work through that, and that's can be a process that is fair as well, just redistributing the people where we need them as well. So as long as we do that fairly, and I'm sure we will, we just got to work through that process. It's just where we are at the moment with that. As far as crime around Hiranui goes, it's pretty backward. Pretty good. Yeah, we're just trotting along from what I hear and keeping an eye on the stats. Burglaries have been creeping up a bit, I think, rural burglaries as well. We don't seem to have the youth crime as they do in town at the moment. There's a real wave of nasty buggers in town, really. Last couple of nights there's been three dairies. One was robbed at Knife Point and someone was stabbed last night. Youth offenders shipped two really bad ones off to other parts of the country, which is a bit of a win. But to do that takes a hell of a lot. So I've just got to repeat offend a lot before we get to that stage where we can actually open up somewhere else. It's a real battle. It's a real dilemma, I think, for police and justice and OT to know what to do with these kids. They're so young, they're 10, 12, 14, and laws don't allow us to do a lot with them. So that's a real challenge. We don't want to be chasing them flat out all around town like that's all they want sometimes, is to be chased or to run and drive at police and try and run us over or ram our cars. So we're trying to use other tactics, use the helicopters, drones, try and just think smarter and spike their cars, or not their cars, their stolen cars. So yeah, it's a battle at the moment, and we're certainly not winning it. Just trying to think outside the square as well. Roads have been pretty good. Up towards the crashes aren't too bad at the moment. We've had our fair share as well. This boy racer element, not too bad out here. We did do, like, one of the questions I had as well was the skids around the area. It's a constant battle, and actually trying to catch them. Country corner, as we call it. Or,
yes.
It
was the exact comment that I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I guess frustration from the local residents that, you know, that 105 and they're taking number plates, but like you say,
yeah,
you can't catch them.
If they're taking number plates, that's great. I haven't seen any of that come through. If they can give us number plates, and certainly there's something we can follow up on. Any noises bring straight away. There's a car around, we'll try to get out there. We've had a camera there before, but haven't had any luck. Just talking to Jeff before, and he said, I think I might have said last time that he'd caught someone, but identify who was actually driving.
So when you say run 105, because I mean, we don't want to be tying up, you know, the 111.
Yeah, no, tie up the 111.
Okay, I'll pass it on.
If it's happening at the time, like any crime, happening at the time, 111. It's the only way you're going to get through for us to do anything. So I'll triage it, I'll determine whether it's urgent enough or whether there's staff around. If there's someone, doesn't need to be local staff, could be regular, could be out that way, or traffic staff, or anyone passing through, they can zip in and check that. Yeah, absolutely. We had a game camera mounted around that area previously, but go for a week or two without tedious. And then trying to identify someone with a vehicle at night Smoke. Yeah, it's all, we were smoking away.
It's a good question though, Pauline, because often we do see the skid marks on the road and you just feel so powerless or frustrated, you know, from a local residents' perspective, because I think there's a little bit up our way, probably at your workers.
Well,
Yeah.
you're on my crossroad, yeah, we know who it is, I just, you know, say one's enough and off you go. The question I have is, I'm very rural, you know, theft is increasing. You know, my dogs let me know when someone's around, and then you car taken off in the dark, usually between those hours of about 10 at night through to about 1, 2 in the morning seems to be the activity. We know our response is long distance, we understand that. What do you suggest to us? I mean, we don't, confronting someone, we don't know what we're walking into, we're not trained for that environment. What's your recommendation to people like me who are farming rurally or lifestyling rurally, quite rurally, and just think what would be the best fit or best policy that they can do to help you do your job?
I could certainly don't recommend confronting them. You don't know what they're going to do.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and dogs are great. Dogs are better than any alarm.
Yep.
They will generally scare them off. If they don't, and they take stuff, it's only stuff.
Yep.
But try and lock it up as best you can. Motorbikes and quad bikes and vehicles, farmers are notoriously hopeless securing stuff.
Relaxed. It's relaxed.
Yes. And then security measures like camera network through the Hurunui is second to none probably for a rural area. So building on that is really important. You can give us a time, for example, just when the dogs go off. Even if you haven't got cameras, that's really good. Down the road we might have a camera that we can hook into. Or if you've got cameras, can get cameras. Just build on that picture. We see a red car driving out, and then that red car goes through a number plate recognition camera, parks up an ambulance or something. So that network for the camera system is gold for us and huge success. So there was a program going in North Canterbury for a couple of years, but it's been given the can by the government. It's called Rural Lookout. But the guy that was doing that, he's still working privately, doing some of our police work as well.
I think some of those, you know, when the Rural Outlook, you know, sort of farm security stuff came through the Rural Mail anyway, and you can purchase the equipment to ensure your, you know, your property is safe from a rural perspective. So, because I think the police came in at that point and did a full assessment and.
Yeah, he was a police employee.
Yeah.
So, and there was a good discount involved with that too. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he's still operating, he's still working with us and using the same hardware camera systems that we use. So if it's on a road that we can access as well, we can hook it up to our camera network that we've got based in all the rural stations, and we can all, and even in Rangiora.
It's just for new councillors, if you're unaware, I mean, the network that Rob's talking about has been put in place with support of volunteer groups and maybe the local Lions Club, you know, but that network, as you say, has been valuable or invaluable as far as nabbing personnel when, you know, things have been happening within our community. And I think one of the first really good examples was the Punama that was at the Hammond Springs Thermal Pools and Spa was stolen off the grounds, and the camera network saw that vehicle come through or out of Hammond Springs through Colbert and through Waikari, you know, at the appropriate timing, and that piece of beautiful piece of Punama was recovered, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks or something like, you know, whatever time frame was irrelevant, you know.
Like Christchurch.
Yeah.
Through that whole system.
Yeah.
And then, like we're saying, we started off with a big piece of Punama at the Hammond Pools, and the guy walks in, all you see if you had no other camera system was the Paul's camera system, which is great, just sees a guy with a hoodie on, couldn't see anything, gloves on, picking up Punama, walking out, so that would have been it. Because we saw the same hoodie walking to a car, saw him getting into a white car, another camera, and then that white car drives through the number plate camera and bang, bang, bang. That's the beauty of it.
So, you know, and that's only one example across many, that since that network of cameras have been put in by a lot of the time with the support of community groups funding, you know, so it's an invaluable network as far as keeping our community as safe as we can. Yeah, so that's cool. Maybe questions. Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back a step, thanks through the chair. You alluded to the, police restructure, and we're thrilled with the outcome. But you alluded to the non-advertising or potential disestablishment of positions. And I guess that set some bells off in my head in regards to, is that just another form of restructure that could quietly happen? I don't know if anyone else is feeling that concern or.
Yeah, I mean, probably see more than I should, but it worries me as well, and out of my hands. So we're just watching this space. I don't want to lose any staff in Hiranui, and some other thoughts around how we get around that. Maybe redeploying in different areas of Hiranui as well, where the workload is, or whether there's a shortage of cover, just so we don't lose any of those staff members. So
yeah, I guess the concern would be that there's a potential for it to happen without the community being aware and able to respond. But I appreciate that you probably can't discuss that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's an operational thing, I guess, and it
yeah
can be with any organisation too. So we had a win, I guess, with the restructure that was went way too far in my view for Hiranui. However,
And I had my 3-monthly meeting with Peter Cooper the other day, and we talked about these things in the same context of what you've just talked about, Pauline. So and I expressed my concern from a district's perspective. The district really stood up and spoke in solidarity around maintaining police presence in our communities. And and that's why I raised that question, is it actually put to bed, or is it, it's something we just need to keep our eyes on, really.
Keep your eyes open and advocate for our.
Correct. Yeah. So we've certainly had that discussion. Robbie, I think you've got a question.
Yeah,
Sorry. Thanks. Sorry.
Two questions. I'm going to go one at a time. Paul has got pretty bad press lately, starting from the two at the top and some testing and that. I'm just wondering how that was reverberating through the ranks. It must be pretty disappointing for you guys.
Yeah, it's quite embarrassing really, and disappointing, but it just keeps on going too.
Because it seems that the next regime seems to be better received.
Yeah, just obviously doing a deep dive everywhere on computer systems and uncovering a wee bit of other stuff as well, as we've seen play out in the media daily. But I think on the whole, the general feeling from the public and from the guys on the street, just getting on with it. No one's making me worried. It's not a culture thing in the police.
The second thing was more local. The cameras that we've got are some directed to you guys and some are council ones, whatever. Just to clarify, I'm thinking of an incident that just happened the other day where some towns snaked all down the domain down here, lost control, hit our new picnic table with a big steel frame so hard that it's cracked the concrete foundation and broke the steel. It'll be a couple of grand to fix if someone was charging for it. He must be on a camera, he must have a damaged car. Do these guys have to ask you to look at that? What's the thing? How can we easily get someone that's got time to look at this footage, and because there must be footage of this car limping out of the domain badly damaged. And I feel they should be contributing.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Report to us, report to
police. To see, because of some cameras you use in some councils, is there a seamless, you can hop in and see what you need to see, or they can find it, then show you, or how's it work?
Well, your council ones, we can't see down there, so we need council staff to provide that footage.
So we
And
can
then
find
make
it,
it-
we find it, they can show you.
Yeah, just the same scenario, like if that red car coming out of it,
Exactly.
we can pick it up with railway cameras. Or- Let us know, put a report through, come and see us, Jeff's on light duties at the moment, so he needs something to do.
But it needs to be formally reported
Formally
for it to
reported.
activate it. I guess that's the question, Robbie, you're asking, you know, so you need
Yeah, I
a
don't
formal
put it in a
report.
service there, but whether or not they then have to put it further, or whether I can come to that.
Formally reported, and I've said.
You report it to us as well, Robbie?
No, don't do that.
He's here first.
Okay, so it looks like some formal reporting needs to be done to both avenues to join the dots to try and find that car limping.
Yeah, they'll pay for the seat.
Okay.
Because I think it's happened before with other council property that hasn't been reported through police, so.
Yeah.
We don't know.
No, that's right. So it needs to be triggered formally for it to be active on. Yeah. So we've all
We're
got
going
something
for
to
these
take.
cards.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Yeah, yep, Chris, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I have a testy question, not for you, but for Greater. Methamphetamine, I know, I saw that, you put taser from too, so I myself. The drug issue, now, I know recently there was a raid in Harden, I was out walking my dogs out and I live on Belmere Road, and I could see this car coming up the back street at a hell of a pace, and went sailing past me with one of you guys, with 4 guys in it, I mean, oh, that's busy. I later heard, but let's wind back from that, that's why it triggered the question. The question is, we know we've got a problem up there in regards to that. How are we going with that? What's the options? And I know it's a tricky one, but I just thought, while you're here, I don't have the opportunity. And I know the guys around me, my constituents, I hear it from them, I don't think it's overbearing concern, but it is a concern, mainly for our youth and our kids, and that's the question.
Sorry. It's a tricky one, because, I mean, we want to hammer these guys as much as we can, but we need the information to be able to get in the door to deal with the drugs or the vendors in there.
Yeah.
And that does come through. It's good that local officer there, Rob's pretty connected.
Yes.
Gets that information, but just encourage any members of the public to report to us, or anonymous even. The Crime Stoppers, we can use that anonymous information. We get 2 or 3 bits of information, we can put it together and do a power check, for example, see if they're using excess power. There's all those little joining the dots type stuff that's important, and suspicious vehicles, report that sort of stuff, helps join the dots. So
We see some interesting cars going past us at the bodies today.
yeah, I mean, we like kicking doors and catching the bad guys, so.
We like kicking the doors in and catching the guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Rob, I guess want to finish off, because this is a pressure time of the year for many of our families, you know, the increased pressure financially and wanting to do the best they can for their children, but inevitably that sometimes impacts on increased family harm evidence in our communities. So do we feel as if we've got sufficient resources, and if that is, you know, if that is what played out in our communities, you know, how are we managing that, because that's a real issue and it's exacerbated this time of the year. So just from a policing perspective, I'm mindful that it's, you know, it's not core business stuff, but you know, and I guess
Well, it is cool. It's a big part of our job.
Yeah.
That people don't see. That's what we do in the middle of the night, any time of day or night, and it is a big draw on resources, and that's why we're fortunate to keep the staff we have, because it's that 24/7 response, and that local knowledge is huge. Dealing with some of those offenders that we know. And if it's a higher level type offence where there might be firearms mentioned or involved, well, then we have got that backup from Rangiora or Town, some specialist units as well. There's the TD team they call it, so tactical dog team, where they have a dog handler and a AOS member as well in the same vehicle, and then there's other squads as well that we can call on. Gets more involved, but we have got that support and the backup, and we have got enough staff here to deal with it. But yeah, it is, you're right, it's a pressure time of year. We are seeing it's probably right at the moment with that pressure and financial stress anyway with the economy.
Yeah, well, that's it's a great comfort, I suppose, but it's, sometimes it's a soft comfort also that actually we're having to need to have increased awareness of the impact when families are under increasing pressure, and it's often, as I said, pushed at this time. And I think in a rural community, if the weather doesn't play its part and the dry is affecting, particularly for farmers as well, it's just one of those sort of things that snowball. So I think it's important that we all have increased awareness of that, and where possible, sort of wrap our services around families as need is required. But I do want to acknowledge the work that you and your team have been doing over the last 12 months, as we have navigated through this restructural and whatever changes, we'll keep our eyes on that. But it is a great comfort to know that you and the team are connected and trusted, trusted members of our community, because to Robbie's point, it hasn't been easy for stuff that's technically, but I want you and your team to know that we have incredibly high level of trust in the job that you and your team do for our community, and thank you for that, and hope that you don't have a busy Christmas and that you can have some time as well. So thanks, Rob, appreciate you coming in and having a yarn with us, and actually what I really appreciated is the open, frank conversations that we can have around this table, because it's here to make the best for our community. So thank you. Enjoy.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Let's go. Thanks, Rob. Radio councillors, look how good we are on time, 1 minute over. That's pretty cool. We are now going to break for lunch, but we do have coming in at 1 PM today a presentation via Zoom with Tim Cadogan from Taumata Arawai, and that will bring our meeting to a close. That will be about half an hour, so through to about 1:30. But we have 2 workshops, sort of part of this induction workshop and ongoing. So that will happen at the conclusion of our meeting at around 1:30. So with that, we'll adjourn for half an hour while we have our lunch.
Okay, kia ora, Tim. Welcome to the Haranui district via remote link, but it's wonderful for me to welcome you here to speak with our councillors today on behalf of Taumata Arawai. Tim, for councillors, we've got some new councillors in our room today, and so Tim was the previous mayor to Central Otago, so he's been around local government and elected members for, I'm not even going to put a number on it, Tim, so you can do that. Tim and his brother were both mayors, one at Central Otago and one at Clutha, and did a huge amount of work within the local government sector. So Tim, will I say jumped ship, or moved across, or repositioned himself, whatever that might be, to be the local government contact with Taumata Arawai. So I warmly welcome you here, Tim, and we've actually got 3 councillors away for the day today, so we haven't got a full suite of membership here, but that's the busy time that we're working in just at the moment. But if I just, obviously our staff's in the room as well, Hamish, Dan, our Chief Operations, and Judith, our Community and Strategy and Governance Advisor here to my left as well. So shall we just hand it over to you, Tim, and then perhaps you can take us through your presentation, and there might be a bit of Q&A as it sits, but we've set aside half an hour for your presentation.
Excellent. Tēnā koe, Mayor Murray, thank you very much, and it's lovely to be here, and thanks to your staff who have made this possible. Kia ora, Hamish, and to councillors, well done, congratulations. And as Murray said, I had 13 years in local government, and it was never boring, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot ahead of you in the coming 3 years. I just want to introduce our Water Services Manager for the South Island, Rachel East. She's there on the screen just to answer any questions that are too hard for the likes of myself, and just to also get a feel for what's happening in Hiranui. So I will share the screen, hopefully. If technology works in my favour, everything should be fine, and you should be seeing a greenish screen with some writing on it, which basically introduces us. Is that where it should be?
Yep, got it.
Excellent, great. So look, the next slide, and I preface this with an absolute due respect to the sensitivities of what's happened recently in Hiranui and in Hanmer in particular. One of probably the biggest issue that we have at Taumata Arawai in having our water be safe is a belief that I fronted many, many times as mayor and as community board member before that there's nothing wrong with our water. We don't need to do anything. Everything's being gold plated. So as I've done this talk throughout the country, I have talked of a camping ground in Canterbury. I haven't named names. I should be moving to the next slide, but for reasons unknown, it hasn't yet. Has the next slide come up?
Not yet.
Tim, maybe can you hit your presentation icon to fill the screen?
Yes. I'm not used to Zoom, I'll have to admit. If I go from beginning, I wonder if that will. Is that working better?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I just want to really emphasize to you, obviously, a lot of what I say here, I won't be saying here because you guys don't need to be told about what happened at Hanmer. We're using this as an example of what can happen and emphasizing that this could have happened anywhere. This is not a reflection of anyone or any place. It could happen anywhere across the country. And to emphasize that, every week we get the reports. When a lab report triggers an E. coli alert, we get told about it, and every week those get compiled into a report that we get. So every week I update councils as it comes their turn for this presentation on what's happening around the country. So last week we had 15 E. coli notifications across New Zealand. One was from a council supply, I won't say where. One was from an early childhood education centre that was self-supplying itself, and 13 were for other supplies, private supplies across the country. So there's still a problem here, and I guess, with absolute deference to the children that became unwell at this holiday park and to the people who are still managing it, we can't not let people know that this happened because we don't want it to happen again. And it's complacency across the country, particularly in those small supplies, that could occur have this occurrence happen again. So I don't need to talk to you guys too much about it, but I wanted you to know that I am talking about this in a bit of the abstract. And one of the benefits of this photograph is the beautiful mountains behind it, because, you know, this isn't a city supply where people think, you know, they're at the end of the chain. Look, in order to not have things like this happen, there's 4 basics that need to be in place. You've got to have your source water protection. Taumata Arowai came to be as a result of the Havelock North water incident, if you want to call it that, back in 2016. And new councillors might not be familiar, but back then, it was a Campylobacter outbreak. It was implicated. It had a hand in the death of 4 people, and somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 people were made very, very unwell. And the scary thing about it is that if there was a bit of a lower level in the Hastings reservoir, a valve would have tripped and the Havelock water would have gone into Hastings, and it would have been 10 times as bad. And so that was when the country started taking its drinking water protection safe. And Havelock happened because sheep feces got into the bore water through an unprotected or a badly protected source. So look after your source water. Importantly for councillors, it also keeps your costs down. If you've got good source water and you look after it, it keeps the capex for building new treatment plants and your opex for operating any of them a lot lower. Filtration's the next step, twofold. One, filtration can remove a lot of pathogens, and secondly, it allows the water to be clean enough for the third step, which is disinfection. Disinfection's done by chlorine, which has been used in water treatment for 100 years. Also by UV treatment, which has been used for about 10 years. And there, from there, the secure distribution, the pipes under the ground, because you could have bugs get into the pipes through a broken pipe with a pressure drop off as well. That's why we insist on, in council supplies, chlorination, what's called residual chlorination, to remain in the supply. So when the water gets taken out of the source water, generally put in a reservoir, generally filtered, then treated with chlorine and UV, and then sent down the pipes with enough chlorine in it to make sure that anything coming in gets killed before it gets to that very last pipe. It's called multi-barrier protection, and the reason we have the multi-barriers is that not everything's going to treat everything. So chlorine is very effective for bacteria such as E. coli, viruses such as norovirus, but it won't treat protozoas. So protozoas are the likes of Cryptosporidium and Giardia, which you certainly don't want to get. They're treated by UV light, and UV light will also deal to bacteria and to viruses, but it won't keep it safe as it travels through the pipe, which is why there's quite a process to having water safe when it comes out that last pipe in the chain. Now, I know when I was an elected member, what I heard an awful lot was, we need to lower the standards. It's because of the costs, or it's gold plated, the standards are too high. And so the way I used to respond to that, and if I can give some advice as an effective response, is this. If you have 1 E. coli or 1 norovirus or one Cryptosporidium, that's one too many, because what that means is you've got fecal matter in the supply, and generally if you can find one, there's going to be more. And once they get inside people, it's going to make them sick. So the number can't be lowered, because 0 is the only number that really will provide effective treatment. So then you're asking, well, which one of those pathogens do you want to not worry about? Bacteria, virus, or protozoas? We don't want to miss out on any of those. So that's a useful, simple answer to put to members of the public when they're saying this is all a bit much, our water's fine. It actually might not be, and that's the key to it. At any given time, it might not be fine, and things can happen. So that's why we have the barriers in place, and that's why they need to stay there. Now, for you as councillors, this is what suppliers can expect from us. Generally, councils across the country are down in that green bottom space where it's voluntary compliance, you're monitoring with minimal intervention on our part. We'll have some feedback if issues emerge, we can help with communications, but generally you've got a good team, everything's going fine. And then we move up to that pointy end where it goes from assisted to directed to enforced. Now, up until 2 weeks ago now, we'd never really used that pointy enforced end, and for a rural council like yourselves at Huranui, this is quite an important bit, because I can't see Hiranui ever getting to, or any council really getting to that enforced part. But what can happen is supplies in your district, private supplies in your district, may get to that in the way that Kaio did for the Far North just a couple of weeks ago, where the council, the Far North District Council, had done all they could to assist with Kaio, with a private supply that had been on a boil water notice for 10 years, and it actually, by the time we intervened, had not been providing any water to even be boiled for something between 2 weeks to a month, depending on who you talk to. At the end of the day, we had to step in and force the council to take over that supply, which isn't a place we want to be. So what's really useful, I think, for both councils and for Taumata Arawai is you folk who are in that room, I know because I've been there, are the eyes and the ears of the community. You're going to hear pretty early on when there's a private supply. For me, it was orchards because we had a lot of irrigation schemes in Central Otago. You're going to hear pretty early on when there's a private supply that's struggling. You know, the old chap who's been running it forever is retired for one reason or another and struggling to find someone to pick it up, or the new people haven't quite got it, whatever. It's really important that you feedback that to your staff so that they know what's going on in the district. Yeah, it's really important because that's one of the things that used to keep me awake at night as a mayor was, what if a couple of these irrigation supplies fell over and we had to pick them up? And I guess for you to ask yourself too, as councillors, is how will you know where your own supplies are sitting on this pyramid? What reports are you regularly getting? What are being provided by your staff to say, hey, here's where we're at? Will you know in advance, or will you know straight away if there's an E. coli breach in one of your council supplies, like there was somewhere else in the country earlier this week? These are the things that you want to be making sure that you're getting the information on in your role as governors. Now, when we talked about Kaio and things going wrong or small schemes that are struggling, the other thing that we'd really appreciate councillors and yourself, Murray, as mayor doing, and staff, is yes, we're a regulator, but for the smaller suppliers in particular, we're not coming with a big stick. We really want to help these small suppliers get compliant. They need to be registered with us by 2028 if they're supplying more than 25 people and actually be compliant by 2030. And to do that, we've got what's referred to as our small but mighty community supplies team, and they will actually come and assist if need be, or teams in, generally speaking, to assist the smaller suppliers with getting better understanding. We've revamped our website so it's got far easier to understand guidance. It was pretty rough, admittedly, earlier on this year, and we just genuinely want to get that message across that for those small suppliers, we're here to help. So please get them to get in touch with us, or have your staff get in touch with us if there's any that they're worried about. Where should your supplies be at? Well, they are fully comply with the rules or an acceptable solution. I'll come to that acceptable solution shortly because you might be unfamiliar with that term. Fully comply with the drinking water standards. Respond promptly to safety risks with appropriate action, so such as if there's a heavy rain and the water gets a bit turbid and the plant isn't working right, your team's going to put a boil water notice in place to make sure that everybody stays safe. Maintain robust risk management plans and demonstrate progress towards resilience. And the pipeline down the bottom speaks to how we're hoping to see different supplies progress in their journey, and we're wanting to see supplies resilient to disruption, such as being affected by heavy rains for council supplies by 2028. So something to consider as councillors: where are you sitting with your supplies on that pipeline, and where or what's in place to get you to where you need to be by 2028. The drinking quality assurance rules, I'm conscious of time because the good stuff lies in the question, so I'll fly over the next few pages. They are the rules of how you operate big supplies. Your staff are all over them, I've got no doubt. I've been in a room with your drinking water staff and they're a fantastic team. Open for consultation until the 19th of December for some tweaks that, again, your staff will be over. Have a look at our website if you want to know more about that. And acceptable solutions, these are methods of abiding or meeting the requirements for small supplies, generally speaking, that aren't using the drinking water quality assurance rules and aren't using centralised treatment. They operate using end-of-point treatment, which is a UV and filter system that's at each house. So instead of treating and then sending the treated water to your house, you send the water to the house and it's treated when it gets there. Really good for, I imagine you'd have quite a few irrigation schemes in the Hiranui. Really good for those schemes that are most of the water's going on the land when it gets dry, as opposed to into people's consumption. I could talk about these all day, I won't, but what we have done in the last few months has changed quite a number of things with them. We're now allowing much lower cost treatment available for households, some sort of 25% of the cost it was just a few months ago. We've clarified responsibilities. We've allowed surface water, although you want to be a bit cautious with surface water for these. If it's very turbid surface water, it's probably not the best idea. And we've got those practical how-to resources. And if you want to talk more about that, let me know and I'll talk your hind leg off. National wastewater standards came into being. They were announced last week. This is a game changer for a lot of councils. I know for my own one, it's got the opportunity to significantly lower costs in the wastewater space. The discharges to water and discharges to land standards come into effect in December this year. Up until now, each regional council has set those standards, but from the 19th of December, they're going to be set, and they are set at a national level. And in 3 years' time, the beneficial reuse of solids and overflows and bypass standards will come into play. There's going to be a webinar on these next Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30. Details on our website. If you're interested, I'd strongly suggest you have a look. And just finally, our reports. The two on the left, really important for you as councillors now and into the future when you are the owners of the CCO with Kaikoura. The Drinking Water Regulation Report tells you where you sit. How are your schemes performing in line with the rest of the country? It's going to have more of a league table basis from next year. And the Network Environment Performance Report, that does essentially the same thing for the effect on the environment of drinking water supplies and wastewater supplies. And the compliance and enforcement policy, that is essentially what I've just been talking about, how we are going to operate dealing with schemes. So just before we come to questions, because I have managed to go just over half of my time talking myself, Rachel, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, thanks, Tim.
Ka pai, thank you. Murray, I'll hand back to you and take the questions, because as I say, that's where the gold always lies in these things, is what people want to know from us.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, we'll open that up, but I do apologise, Rachel, for not welcoming you into our district as well. So thank you for that, and my apologies for that. So there's probably some information that we've just heard now that's maybe relatively new for some of our newer members of our team. And for those of us that have been around the table for a wee while, it will be a reinforcement or, adding to the knowledge that we've had on this journey. But got about 10 minutes or thereabouts for some questions. So I'm happy to be the recipient of that. Thank you, Steve. If you can just frame up your question and we'll get Tim or Rachel to respond. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Rachel, as well. Obviously, one of the things that we are looking at doing is with these council-controlled organisations, WISCO. Do you have any concerns that we are going to lose some of our quality versus profit? Because obviously we're going to be looking to try and make profit, I'm sure, from a privately led company. And is this something that you guys are going to be overseeing with your hat on?
Partially, we will be overseeing. So to the core of the question in terms of quality, the quality that we're seeking isn't going to change at all with the CCOs. They're going to be under the same requirements as you as a council are. In terms of profits and so forth, out of our lane, but the Commerce Commission is there as the economic regulator, and they'll be watching for all of those economic things, which, as I say, is blissfully out of my lane, but it is going to be monitored from above.
Yeah. And that same criteria, Steve, will actually be on like a WISCO arrangement that we've entered into, or an in-house business unit. The Commerce Commission will also apply that same criteria or oversight to managing that process. That makes sense?
Yeah, and I also think that there is no intention for this WISCO to make a profit or have a distribution. So it has the mechanism to do so, but you will set the rules for that, and at the moment, the way we've drafted the stakeholder agreement says that the councils will agree a dividend policy, and the expectation is that there will be a zero dividend. But you can change it if you want to, that's their expectation.
Okay, any other questions, or who's the next cap off the rank? Thanks, Chris.
Just on, I see there you, for rural's water, is that correct that you can actually have treatment at the household as opposed to the source?
Yep, absolutely. So depending on your source water, so the endpoint treatment units that are used for this have filtration followed by UV treatment, and that will provide safe drinking water once it comes out of the tap, so long as those are properly maintained. So if you have a supply, say it's a small council supply, or it may be one of the rural supplies where the council owns it, but the farmers have operated it since the government money came in the 80s. So still some clarification around the country who owns what at the moment. Some of those schemes don't have yet the protozoa barrier on them. They have, in a lot of cases, filtration or chlorination, but the protozoa risk is still quite high. So a way of not having to put in a chlorination plant, and a UV plant at the centralised treatment, is to actually have the water go to each house and be treated there by the endpoint treatment units. Now, up until we made changes 3 or 4 months ago, those endpoint treatment units had to be validated to one of a number of international standards. As a consequence of that, they were coming in at about $10,000 each for each household. Obviously a very expensive bit of kit. And the reason they were expensive was that the UV lamp treatment can be vulnerable to the sheath surrounding it getting dirty if the water's turbid and not being effective. These would tell you, they would in some cases actually switch off, or they would make so much noise you couldn't ignore it and so forth, if the water pressure dropped, showing that the filters were getting blocked, or if the UV light wasn't penetrating properly. The ones that we've now allowed for household use for under 25 people in a household, which is most households, don't have the same bells and whistles. They'll have a wee light that'll tell you to change the lamp every year, but if something goes wrong with the light, it won't tell you. So there's a greater onus. It's that balance between risk and affordability. We know that there's a lot of places in the country at the moment that have no treatment because they couldn't afford the 10 grand or didn't want to spend the $10,000. So the theory is, if we lower the requirements, and some of these for the smaller houses or perhaps holiday homes or whatever, they're around $1,500, so a massive drop in cost. They are better, but the person operating them has to look after them. Or if it's a council supply, you can have your staff look after them yourself if that's the path you choose. But it is an effective way to get to safe drinking water for those very small supplies.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And Chris, we've been looking at the progress of that acceptable solutions as the new technology has come online and to find the right fit for purpose, I guess. So it's been a bit of a journey to get to this point of finding some economic but meeting the threshold outcomes. Yeah, Robbie.
Could you just clarify that, please? Is Te Manawa certifying particular units, or they just set a standard that different suppliers have to get theirs ticked off too?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Robbie. So the main thing is, we're not saying you can buy an ABC unit, but an XYZ is no good. So we haven't got a list of approved units, but we require two things. One is the degree of filtration, a 5 then a 1 micron filtration unit, so that we know the water's getting well filtered. And then secondly, the amount of light that comes out of the UV lamp has to equate to 40 microjoules. I'm looking at Rachel, hopefully that I've got the wording right. And that requires the flow to be at the right flow as well. So some cheaper units will be able to get to 40 microjoules, but only if the water's flowing so slow it won't work. And so what we're doing, instead of saying to people, hey, look, you need to get into all this complex stuff, we're saying, here's what needs to be working on these units, here's what you've got to look for, but buy from a reputable dealer. It's really important that you go to somebody who knows what they're doing. This is a case where if it looks too cheap, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So we're really emphasising to people, go to the reputable dealer for these goods, and get the right ones in.
Thanks, that's triggered another question on Robbie's mind, Tim.
Yep.
Yes, I'm just wondering, testing wise, I mean, there's going on the councils, you know, if it's going, the water coming out the other side of these units, which may or may not be, it might come from Seaver or something, who knows? Yeah, who's checking that?
Yeah, so
Outside.
we've got a couple of options. So if a supplier, let's say an irrigation supplier with 10 houses or 20 houses on it, decides, right, we're going to become compliant, we're going to put these units in, and we're going to do the replace the filters every 3 months, replace the UV lamp every year, and we're going to do testing on them as required. So actually taking samples and testing them. Then the supplier, be that a council supplier or you know, an irrigation company, they can do that, or they can take a pathway that says, we're going to require you as the property owner to put this in, and every year we're going to get in touch with you and are going to tell you, you need to replace your lamp and you need to do your testing. So again, in order to reach the balance of affordability alongside actually getting these units into people's houses, we are relying further on the people to do that testing if the supplier chooses not to do it themselves.
Happy with that, Robbie? Cool. Around the table, any other questions? Thank you, Hamish.
So I've been following with interest the Kaya situation and the council up there, and then now being ordered by Taumata Arawa to take over that supply. How do the funding arrangements for that work?
Yeah, the money isn't going to come from Taumata Arawa, and it isn't going to come from the government, if that's because I have had that question framed a bit more directly. The funding for it will be down to Far North District Council, and whether they do that across the whole district or whether they put it upon the Kaio people or not, I have no idea. That'll be up to them to sort out. Obviously not a good thing at all to have happen, to suddenly have the responsibility and the cost of a water scheme get dropped on the lap, because we know, I know it's not in the LTP, that's for sure. So very difficult, but at the end of the day, the people of Kaio are the people of the Far North. The council had done everything that they could to try to help, and now it's got progressed even further. But these poor folk, 10 years on a boiled water notice, and the risk that you have, and I'm sure councillors will be aware of this, is after a while, people can get a bit complacent with boiled water notices. The risk hasn't gone away; they've just got a bit used to it. And so it's not ideal at all. And when the water that was being managed or dealt with, or efforts were being made to try to rectify that situation, when the water just stopped, and that's when it became imperative that something got done. And it was done in close association with the Far North District Council. There's been a lot of talk and communication before that.
Yeah, I guess there's a salutary lesson for all of us here, though, Tim, that potentially we could be landed with one of these things. And I think Kaio was a pretty small scheme.
Yep.
Cost of upgrade is pretty large. And so either it has to be shared across the whole district, or those that benefit pay. And the cost of upgrading might be too great for those consumers on the scheme to pay. So what happens in that situation where the council says, well, we tried to do this, they couldn't afford to pay for it, so we're not going ahead with the upgrade. What happens next?
Well, in that case, we're heading into theoretical territory here, and again, a bit outside my lane. And Rachel, if I go outside of it, let me know. But I think I used to be a lawyer, but it was a long time ago. The legal requirements fallen on the district council now. It's just a really unfortunate circumstance in how it's fallen on them, and they're going to need to bring it up to compliance. And how the funding is found for that, I don't know. But I sympathise where you're coming from, Hamish. And when the Water Services Act came in 2021. I was Mayor of Central Otago, and I still don't know how many small and irrigation schemes I had, but I genuinely used to lie awake at night worrying if some of the directors went, hey, I've got all this liability now, I'm out of here. By and large, they knew what they were doing and they wanted to maintain that local control of their own water, and it worked out fine. But it's a major risk for every rural council in the country, which is why communicating and with those suppliers and saying Taumata Arawai are here to help early is a really good idea. Sorry, Mary.
Thank you for that, Tim. I've got a Councillor Brett has got a question as well.
Hi there, Tim. If I could just follow on from what Robbie mentioned, if the regulation or the overview of the sale of the units is relatively robust, and then the ongoing sort of maintenance, if you like, schedule of those units, don't we run the risk of the perception being if there's a group of people that didn't maintain or bought subpar units, that's a council issue, the council have not done their job properly, an outward perception?
Yep, and that's why if it's a council scheme, you're going to have to make the decision of whether you're going to keep your staff maintaining those units in people's houses, or you're going to put the risk over to them. And that's a scheme. A question that's up for each council to make the decision on, because there's benefits both ways and detriments both ways. But you might decide the risk is just too high. These are our people. We're going to do that. Or you might go, you know what, add it. So quite a tough decision, that one.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Brett. Tim, when you put up on when the triangle was put up before on the sort of thresholds, or as you work through from volunteer to assist to direct to enforce, what is do you get a chance to have a misdemeanor once or twice before you move through to the next stage? How does one progress to a point of enforcement, which is at the peak of the triangle, or what is the process for that?
Yeah, so look, we take a proportionate response, and that's going to have a number of factors come into play. So if it's a large supply and therefore the risk is far higher because a lot more people are going to get sick, that's one thing. If we've got suppliers who are making mistakes all the time, that's another thing. If we have suppliers who have had a glitch, who are generally working really, really well, and just something's gone wrong, and these things can happen. Sometimes a crucial bit of plant breaks, or a river, one of the braided rivers changes direction and mucks something up for you. Those things can happen. So as you progress up it, you don't get to the top realistically through just one thing going wrong. Because, and most council suppliers, and as I say, I've been in meetings with your team, they're fantastic, aren't going to get there because, we know that things are going to happen, and we're here to assist in whatever way we can. So you gradually come up, and I guess a good difference might be from the second to the third level is where you'll have a council supply that's got a scheme that's not going that well, that's having regular boil water notices because the river's changed path and there's more dirt getting in it or whatever. But they're putting those boil water notices in, as opposed to councils where we have to say to them, you need to put a boil water notice on here because we're not happy with the level of treatment, and that suddenly that other level up. So there's a lot of thinking goes into how you wind up sitting or where you wind up sitting on that triangle. Rachel, you're involved heavily in that side of things. Is there any further comment you want to make?
I think you covered it well, Tim. It's really about being fair, proportionate and transparent and open. So there'll be a lot of engagement, a lot of conversations with council. And as Tim said, it is really around protecting public health. So there may be some times when we need to step in to protect that public health, the immediate effects of that. But there is always ongoing conversations and engagement at whatever stage we're at as well.
That's wonderful, thank you. Robbie, is there another question, or are you?
Yeah, just a quick one. What's the sort of the time on the D-Day between helping and encouraging and getting the big stick out?
It'll be a case-by-case basis, Robbie, but I know the first thing, if we have to start having conversations and the staff and generally council staff are very actively engaged, know what they're doing, and are willing to work with us to try to find solutions, the big stick's not going to come out because we're working together, but where the big stick sometimes has to come out is where that's breaking down. We haven't pulled out the big stick hardly ever at all, gratefully. We haven't had to. but it's, yeah.
Early days, Tim. That's great. And look, Tim, I think it's been really valuable having you come on today. I feel as if there's no other questions around the table here. And I guess with at the front of your presentation, when you talked about the case in Hanmer Springs, it's worthy to note that that wasn't a that was not a council supplied situation, and our council has actively, I know, had conversation working with the staff to remedy or rectify, and we've supported a progressive position for the camp to provide that safe water every day for everyone byline that you introduced your topic on today. So yeah, it's important. I mean, our district is well versed in supply of water, both from a source perspective to the pipes that we invest in to put in the ground, and to ensure that people have good potable drinking water, but we also have wastewater treatment plants that are fitting inside consent, and that's been a long held strategy from this council's perspective, which, you know, I feel that we are working to that level, that threshold that we're all talking about. So I guess if there's no further comment from anybody, if you've got nothing more to say from a staffing perspective, thanks very much for both your coming on today, Tim and Rachel. I think it's been a valuable discussion, and you know, we're much better together in this world of safe drinking water. And thank you for your time this afternoon.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Mayor Murray, and thank you for your time. Wish the councillors and yourself and Hamish and your team all the best with a terribly interesting triennium ahead of you. And maybe in a year's time might come back and just have another chat if that's going to be of use. But look forward to seeing you at the next rural and provincial Murray. And Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you get a good break.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. All the best to you as well, and we'll keep in contact. But yeah, a further update as time progresses would be really helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Rightio.
Ray, were those slides sent through? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, please. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. This paper that calls our meeting to a close. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, councillors. I think we've had an interesting suite of presentations today. I hope you have found that they have been useful. They will thought-provoking, you know, and they relate those touch points in our roles that we play. So it's fantastic to do that. And with that, I will call the meeting to a close. Thank you.